Hi everyone, we hope you're doing well. We're hanging in there though honestly, we haven't been getting much sleep lately. Today, we want to answer a question we get a lot: how do we publish our audiobooks? First, we post most audiobooks on Patreon as paid content. They stay paid for a few months. After that, they become free to listen to on Patreon forever. A few weeks later, we post them on other places like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, X. Lately, things have been a bit slow in terms of new members. So we'd love your help. Please share our site with your friends or in places like Facebook groups, Twitter, X, Discord, Reddit, or novel forums. Even one share can really help us grow. Thanks so much for your support. Chapter 1: Cell phone gaming was one of my few hobbies that made me unemployed overnight. It doesn't cost any money, and you can enjoy it anytime, anywhere, regardless of time and place, so it's the perfect hobby for an unemployed person like me who doesn't have money. After eating the meal my mom made as usual, I was rolling around in bed and looking for a new game, when it caught my eye. Heart of Steel? When I clicked on the game, attracted by the familiar yet unique name, a simple explanation appeared. It's a game where you can change history by choosing the country you want and the person you want. Thinking it wouldn't be a bad idea, I clicked on the menu and a list of hundreds of countries appeared. From well-known countries such as the United States, Russia, and China, to third-world countries such as Nepal, Armenia, and Ethiopia, to novice countries such as Djibouti and Nauru, there was no country without it. Are you hitting a bit? My first choice was Gambia. There is no particular reason. It's just something my soul told me to do. But unfortunately, when I clicked on Gambia, it just said that it was still being prepared and I couldn't connect. If it's going to be like this, why did you put it in? So what should we do? USA? It's already a superpower, so what else can you change? UK? France? I'm not particularly interested. I don't like China, and I'm not particularly interested in Russia. Afghanistan? Tibet? I'm interested, but I think the difficulty level is too hellish. After much consideration, the country I chose was Germany. Germany. Nowadays, it prides itself on being a European powerhouse and is a shy country that neglects its duties, but a century ago it was the world's biggest problem child. I chose Germany because the level of difficulty itself seemed appropriate. When I clicked on Germany, a seemingly endless list appeared. From Friedrich I to Martin Luther, Bismarck, and the current German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz. I became dizzy with the long, long list that seemed to never end no matter how many times I scrolled through it. Oh my god, how many people is this? Choosing just one thing from a list of probably 1,000 people would be a waste of time. Getting annoyed, I clicked the random button. If anyone gets caught, they have to go to that guy. Now that I think about it, I shouldn't have done that. No. The best way was not to play the game itself. But by the time I realized this, the game had already started. When the roulette stopped, I couldn't help but be surprised. Hitler? Is this true? Adolf Hitler. The rare dictator in human history that no one knows about. However, since Hitler was born in Austria, I began to question whether he should have been in Austria and not Germany. Well, Hitler himself considered himself German and mainly worked in Germany, so it cannot be said that he was wrong. Although I was somewhat averse to the image that Hitler had, I thought it would be more fun to play Hitler than to play Bismarck, a fraud who descended into reality, or Frederick the Great, who was just amazing in terms of luck. When I clicked on Hitler's photo, the screen changed and mission appeared. Hitler, who was an aspiring painter, tried to unite Europe under the German flag, but ultimately failed. Become the Führer, turn Germany into a great power, win the war, and fulfill his unfulfilled ambitions. I pressed the play button with a light heart. I lost consciousness immediately. How could this happen? When I opened my eyes, I had become Hitler. It's not a joke, really. At first I thought it was a dream. However, it is a sight you can see, a sound you can hear, and even a feeling of touch on your skin. All things considered, this wasn't a dream, it was reality. When I first realized the situation I was in, I seriously considered suicide. Although dying was a little scary, I was willing to die if I could return to my original world. But when I was about to die, I started to think it was pointless. What if you die and you don't return to the original world, but it ends as it is? What should I do then? I regret living so far to end my life here. Also, I had some hopes that if I waited, some way or clue to escape this place would appear. For this reason, I eventually gave up on dying and decided to adapt to reality. Having already become Hitler, I decided to live a life different from the Hitler of history in order to make history even a little more positive. Instead of entering politics, I stayed in the military and served my time. Thanks to his history of being awarded the Iron Cross, he was even awarded the rank of Sergeant Major. Since I was not one to enjoy luxury, I spent less, and later I saved up enough money to be able to live without worrying about money until I got old and died. While I was living a leisurely life just waiting for the day to retire, a civil war broke out. The Communist Party, supported by the Soviet Union, rioted all over the country, and Germany quickly fell into chaos. To make matters worse, Poland took advantage of the civil war to invade. While leading my platoon and fighting the Polish army, I was killed with a bullet lodged in my chest. Is this the end? But when I came to my senses, I was back in the Hitler of the past. This was my first regression. This time, instead of remaining in the army, he returned to Austria, Hitler's homeland. It was expected that, unlike Germany, where civil war was expected to break out in the future, Austria would be safe. But my expectations were spectacularly wrong. As civil war broke out in Germany, communist riots also occurred in Austria. As Austria fell into chaos, Italy and Czechoslovakia intervened in the civil war in the name of suppressing the Communist Party and maintaining order. I was killed in an Italian airstrike. During my second retreat, I went to Switzerland. It would be safe in Switzerland. There would be no reason for a civil war to break out, and there would be no invasion. However, even if we avoided war, we could not avoid traffic accidents. On my way home from grocery shopping, I was hit by a truck that was running at a red light while crossing the street. He was rushed to the hospital, but died 2 days later. In the third time, I was able to avoid the truck. However, that evening, during a struggle with a robber who broke into his house, he was stabbed in the carotid artery. As I was dying from excessive bleeding, I belatedly recalled the mission I saw when I started the game. What did you say? Yes, he said he would become Führer and turn Germany into a great power. The deaths that I couldn't avoid no matter how hard I tried may have been caused by me avoiding my mission. I thought that if I completed the mission, not only would I no longer die, but I might be able to escape this horrible regression. So I decided to become president. As Hitler did throughout history, he ascended to the position of Führer, reoccupied the Rhineland, annexed Austria, ceded the Sudetenland, and regained West Prussia and Posen. I thought my job was done, but there was still an ambush left. It is said that human greed has no end, and when Poland, their archenemy, was overthrown, the Prussian nobles, the Junkers, began to be greedy for the restoration of the monarchy. Naturally, I was opposed to the restoration of the monarchy, because there was no need or reason to do that in the first place. But the proud Junkers thought differently. Did he sincerely think that Germany without the Kaiser was not Germany, or was the restoration of the monarchy an excuse and just wanted to seize the power he had? Maybe it was both. Anyway, they staged a coup and imprisoned me in the basement of the Abwehr Counterintelligence Bureau. They announced to the public that I was in critical condition, placed the blame on the SS, and carried out a purge. The SS chose resistance rather than being quietly disbanded, which resulted in a civil war. When civil war broke out in Germany, Britain, France, Italy, and the Soviet Union intervened. Just before the Soviet army entered Berlin, I was dragged out of the basement and shot. Just before I lost consciousness, I made a promise. In the next regression, I will definitely not repeat the previous mistakes. I will definitely succeed and put a bullet in the assholes of the bastards who fucked me up. Chapter 2 Corporal When I returned for the 5th time, I had become Corporal Hitler, who was in full swing as a messenger on the Western Front in 1918. During my first regression, I woke up an hour before I was possessed. The second time was a day ago, the third time was a week ago, and the fourth time was a month ago. And this time, I woke up a year ago, on the Western Front in 1918. I don't know the detailed reason. However, based on past experience, I suspected that the reason the viewpoint moves back as the regression is repeated is some kind of penalty. What should I say? It's similar to LOL's demotion system. Every time you lose a game, your rating goes down. Since he has repeated numerous failures, it would be roughly correct to say that he became Hitler during his time as a corporal on the Western Front due to the accumulation of penalties. Fuck, the more I think about it, the angrier I get. In the original history, who would have thought that the Junkers who were whining to Hitler not to go to war would stage a coup just to avoid starting a war? However, I have no friends who will listen to my complaints, and no mentors who can advise me how to act like this next time. It's just me alone. You can't despair here. I have to survive until the end and put lead bullets in the barrels of those who beat me and threw ashes on the cooked rice. And I will complete the mission and return to the home I miss. This is the original world where there are computers and smartphones, where you can buy as much food as you want as long as you pay, and where you can sleep peacefully without worrying about war breaking out tomorrow. Where should I give up? Until the end, who wins? Hey, Hitler. Corporal Hitler. Take this to the warehouse. Alright. Hitler, gather some kids and repair camp number 2. The regimental commander is coming for an inspection in the afternoon, so do it carefully, okay? Corporal Hitler, I understand. But where I'm now is none other than the military. I completely melted into the hectic daily life that went on without a moment's notice. About a week after becoming possessed by Hitler, an incident occurred. Corporal Hitler? Why? The company commander is looking for you. I am going right now. As many people know, Hitler's position during World War I was that of a messenger. At that time, communication equipment was not very developed, so people had to go back and forth between the front lines and the rear to relay information. Corporal Hitler has arrived. You're here. This is the regiment commander's order. Please deliver this to the 2nd Battalion on the front line. You mean now? For reference, the sun is just about to set in the sky. Okay. Right now. Holding back the sigh that threatened to burst out, I took the regimental commander's order from the company commander and took it with me. Unfortunately, the only bicycle in the company was being repaired, so I had to run to the front line on my own 2 feet. Damn Hitler. Why do you have to volunteer for such a troublesome and dangerous position and make people suffer? But what can you do? If a corporal like me gets an order from above, I have to follow it. Still, I was quite confident in my physical strength, so running wasn't particularly difficult. I just feel uncomfortable because I feel like I'm alone while everyone else is resting. For an hour, I headed to the front line, recalling memories of physical training in the military. We arrived at the 2nd Battalion only after the sun had completely set. Stop, stop. If you move, I'll shoot you. Owl. Kangaroo. As I shouted the secret slogan, the sentry lowered his gun aimed at me. Where do you belong? 1st Battalion. This is the 2nd Battalion, right? I have the orders now, so please tell me where the battalion commander's office is. After being guided, I arrived in front of the 2nd Battalion commander, saluted and then took out the order form from my pocket. Except for the edges of the envelope being wrinkled, it is in good condition. This is an order from the regiment commander. Please confirm. Well, I am sure it's an official order. Go outside and wait. The battalion commander, who accepted the order I handed him, had a heated discussion with his subordinates. After hearing about the British Army, supply, and number of troops, a young major walked out. Thank you for your hard work coming here. Thank you. If I don't have anything else to say, can I go? It's okay if you go, but dinner will be served soon, so why not eat and go? Chicken stew is being served specially today. I'll eat and then go. Oh, I can't stand chicken. I haven't even seen meat since I landed here, but chicken. I felt my appetite, which had died down because I had been eating a lot of steamed turnips, come back. Through the major's consideration, I was placed among the soldiers waiting for dinner and waited for it to begin. Eons passed, and 4 cooks appeared carrying 2 large soup cans. It kills the smell, really. Is this the first meat I've tasted in months? The tired and starving soldiers were so intoxicated by the faint smell of chicken stew that their saliva flowed. Of course me too. When the cook opened the lid of the pot, the smell became even more intense. Just as cheers were about to erupt among the soldiers, the ground suddenly shook and an explosion was heard. It's artillery fire. Everyone evacuate. The enemy's bombardment had begun. Holy shit. Especially at this moment. When the shelling began, the soldiers rushed to the shelter without delay. Hunger is hunger, but saving one's life comes first. Putting my regrets behind me, I went into a nearby shelter with soldiers I had never met before. A sergeant with a face like a skull and cheekbones was the last to enter the shelter. What followed was a violent vibration. Fuck you guys, you can't even eat. This is why I hate Tommies. When will this damn bombardment end? Everyone was on edge because they couldn't even eat and had to crouch in a narrow shelter. Instead of being able to eat the chicken I was looking forward to, I was left waiting endlessly for the bombardment to end. Is there anything more pitiful like this? Hey, it's my Palja. Now that I think about it, it looks like a face I've never seen before. Where do you belong? 30 minutes after the shelling began, questions were asked to me, who was quietly crouching in the corner. 1st Battalion. 1st Battalion? The 1st Battalion should be in the rear, right? I came as a messenger but ended up stranded. Damn it. When he said that he was accidentally trapped in a shelter while trying to eat some chicken, the soldiers of the 2nd Battalion burst into laughter. This guy, you're lucky to have scabies. I must have sucked a lot of honey from the rear, isn't this enough? Honey. How much work does a messenger have to do? Whether it's a messenger or something else, if you're in the rear, you're all in trouble. That's right. Even though he is a messenger and suffers as much as he can, here he is laughed at for being a slut because he came from the rear. How long have they been on the front line? The moment I opened my mouth to say something out of frustration, an incomparably stronger vibration hit the shelter. It looks like it fell quite close this time. So. Huh? It seemed like dust was flowing down from the ceiling, and then the wooden boards that made up the ceiling split in half and dirt poured out. Chapter 3 as my vision darkened, my breath caught in my throat. At the same time, I felt like my whole body was being crushed, as if I had been crushed under a huge rock. I tried moving my hands and feet, but they didn't move. When I opened my mouth, dirt seeped into my mouth. She couldn't even open her eyes because of the dirt that covered her entire body. I struggled because I thought I was going to die, but the more I struggled, the more pressure I put on my body. In less than a minute, I felt a burning pain in my lungs. This is wrong. As I instinctively sensed death, my body became weak and I could not think of anything. It's over. The moment I gave up on everything and was about to close my eyes, someone's rough hand came through the dirt, grabbed the back of my head, and pulled me back. Phew. When I opened my eyes, a scary-looking giant who looked like something out of a historical drama was looking down at me. I don't think he's a bandit, but I don't think he's the Grim Reaper either. But are you wearing a military uniform? Hey, bro. Are you coming to your senses? He almost died. He was neither a bandit leader nor a Grim Reaper. It was an ally. Behind the giant, our soldiers were pulling out buried soldiers from what had been an evacuation shelter. Thank you. I really lived and died. I don't know if it's just luck or if it's not time to die, but I survived. For now. But it was too early to be at ease. Emergency. Bisang. Tommies are coming. As soon as the bombardment ended, the British attack began. Everyone prepare for battle. As soon as the bombardment ended, the British army crossed the no man's land and launched an attack. While the enemy was passing through a no man's land full of shell pits, rotting corpses, rats, trash, barbed wire, and stakes, our troops hastily entered into a combat stance. Why don't you run faster, you bastards? Do you all want to get lost? Before the soldiers could even recover from the aftereffects of the bombardment, they had to run around while listening to officers and non-commissioned officers shouting and swearing. Of course me too. Fuck. 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 I feel so unfair that I suddenly became possessed by Hitler, but now I have to fight. Not just a fist fight, but a fight where bullets fly and you could die. If I hadn't been so greedy for chicken, this wouldn't have happened. Damn it. I had a lot of regret. The actual battlefield was filled with a sense of urgency that was incomparable to the mock battles often experienced in the military. Ready the machine guns. Don't shoot until I tell you to. The British Army had already passed more than half of the no man's land, leaving about 600 meters to the friendly trenches. As I looked at the enemies coming at me like a swarm of dense ants, my heart was pounding like crazy and I broke into a cold sweat. I've seen a lot of movies about trench warfare in World War I, etc. However, the difference between what I saw on the screen and what I saw with my own eyes on the actual battlefield was indescribable. At least you won't die when you see it on screen, but here you have to risk your life. Start shooting. Shoot. When the command to shoot was given, everyone reflexively pulled the trigger. As gunshots rang out in succession, the sight of the enemy's front line collapsing came into view. As the MG-08 heavy machine gun, which I had only seen in pictures on the internet, fired like crazy, the British troops fell like dominoes. The enemies barely screamed. It might be more accurate to say that I couldn't scream. Like everyone else, I pulled the trigger of the rifle as hard as I could. However, the Dre-1098 rifle I am currently using was quite cumbersome as I had to manually move the bolt to remove the cartridges. In fact, all rifles of this period were like that. I'm dying, really. I was shooting so hard that before I knew it, I had used up all the loaded bullets. As I took out a fresh clip from my pocket, a bullet hissed past my ear. Huh. I was so shocked that my legs lost their strength. It sent shivers down my spine to think that life and death were separated by just a few centimeters. Hey, you! Have you been shot? A sergeant shouted as he saw me sitting on the floor. I barely shook my head. Oh, no. Then quickly stand up and fight. Now the enemies as a blinding bullet flew through his temple, the sergeant fell backwards like a machine at the end of its life. Blood soon accumulated on the curved floor, forming a small puddle. Shit. I barely survived, but after only a few minutes, I looked like I was dead again. Ah. Arg. Medic. Oh no, Franz. Help me. The screams of soldiers wounded by bullets and the desperate voices desperately searching for medics rang in my ears, making me lose my senses. But there was another sound that was even more terrifying. What is that again? No way? Fuck. It's a tank. A tank has appeared. I thought I could hear the sound of rolling iron wheels along with the bizarre engine noise, and then the menacing screams of soldiers announcing the appearance of a tank erupted from all over the trench. When I pulled up the strength I had been nursing, I could see a huge monster crossing the no man's land. Train. The flower of ground warfare and the Grim Reaper of infantry. A tank identical to the Mk4 I remembered was rolling towards us with a bunch of infantry. I heard that when tanks first appeared on the battlefield, the German army was anxious because they did not know how to destroy tanks. However, the story was different in 1918, 2 years after the tank appeared. The Germans, who were initially taken aback by the tank, realized that this tank had surprisingly weak defense, and quickly developed weapons to deal with it. It's coming, take aim. When the tank appeared, our troops took out their secret weapon. At first glance, the tank was so large that it looked like an enlarged version of an ordinary rifle. As you can guess from the name, it is extremely large, probably because it was created solely to deal with tanks. Although it was quite heavy due to its size, its performance was certain. Launch. The tank, which spewed fire and made a loud roar that was incomparable to that of an ordinary rifle, hit the front of the Mk4. Hit. You got it right. The tank, hit repeatedly by tank large 13.2mm bullets, soon stopped. The driver may have been injured, or there may have been a problem with the engine, causing it to no longer roll. However, the British Army did not have just one tank. As soon as the first tank was taken out, 2 more tanks appeared from behind. To make matters worse, hey, what are you doing now? When the tank gunner did not fire until the second tank overtook the previously destroyed tank, the panicked officer shouted, "A tram is coming. Why don't you shoot? The gun is broken. The shell casing is stuck and won't fall out. It's going to spin, really." When the secret weapon I trusted was suddenly retired, there was only one means left. Now, let's all take one. Me too. Okay. This is the only way to catch that monster. As the tanks approached, cluster grenades were distributed. I suddenly took charge of one of the cluster grenades and was suddenly given the important task of dealing with tanks. Damn it. Everyone stand by. Come. Keep in mind. You must, absolutely, catch it at once. I understand, so stop talking. My heart is on the verge of exploding right now. The 2 unlucky soldiers like me had their faces turned pale, as if they were about to faint at any moment. I wonder if that is the face of a living person or a dead corpse. Before we knew it, a tank had arrived right in front of the trench. I had no idea that the caterpillar sound I heard so many times in the military was so terrible. Now is the time, throw it. At the officer's command, the 3 of us threw cluster grenades almost simultaneously. The grenade, which he threw with all his might, surprisingly landed right on top of the tank. An explosion. Gotcha. The tank, which had been hit directly in the upper part by a cluster grenade, burst into flames, spouting a plume of fire. As the tank soldiers, their bodies on fire, came out of the tank screaming, the waiting soldiers fired bullets all at once. But, what, that guy is still alive. Of the grenades thrown by the other 2, one exploded away from the silver tank, while the other grenade did not explode for some reason. Thanks to this, the British Army still had 1 tank left. He fired his machine gun and turned the 2 soldiers who threw the grenade into a hive. And they tried to trample the trenches with steel wheels. If it continued like this, it would be the end. The moment we allowed that monster to break through, it would rip through the trench with the machine gun on the right, and we would be trapped in a hive. In a desperate moment, an unexploded cluster grenade came into view. At that moment, the tank stopped moving as if there was a problem with the engine. If you wanted to catch him, now was your chance. I quickly ran towards the cluster grenade. Hey, what are you doing? Dangerous. Since it was the same whether I died one way or another, I decided to take an adventure. I picked up the grenade that had fallen on the ground and approached the tank. The reason the grenade didn't explode was simple. Because I just threw it without even pulling out the pin in the first place. This way it won't explode. He pulled out the grenade pin and threw it onto the tank. Then he hurriedly fell to the floor, holding his head. There was a loud roar and a sound of small fragments and parts falling. When I looked up, I could see a brightly burning tank. Just as I was about to exclaim, a roar was heard from the right. When I turned my head, there was a British soldier running towards me, brandishing a mounted rifle. When I saw the blade of the bayonet shining and reflecting the light, I quickly picked up the rifle and pulled the trigger. But the bullet didn't go out. A thumb-sized piece of metal was stuck in the body of the gun. What the fuck? Meanwhile, the enemy soldier who approached me shouted and waved his gun. Chapter 4 A meeting of legends. In a moment of desperation, the decision to lean forward crossed my mind. A split-second decision saved his life. Because I leaned forward, the enemy soldier's bayonet passed me by. The British soldier lost his balance and fell to the ground with a dull sound. While the enemy was suffering, I pulled out a bayonet from my side and rushed at the enemy. If you don't kill it, you die. I can't die until I get revenge on those who fucked me. Humanly speaking, I could have died 5 times. What more do you want here? As a result of moving as guided by the survival instinct, he plunged the bayonet into the opponent's chest without hesitation. When his bayonet was pulled out, His blood poured out like a fountain. After taking the gun out of the hand of a dying enemy soldier with blood pouring out, he returned to the trench and fired at the crowd of enemies. When I saw that about 2 or 3 enemy soldiers had been shot down, I ran out of bullets. The Lee Enfield rifle could no longer be used because the ammunition was different from the Dre 1898 rifle. While checking for abandoned weapons nearby, an MP-18 submachine gun caught my eye. Coincidentally, there were spare magazines lying around. I immediately picked it up and fired wildly at the enemies who came close to the trench. 2 British soldiers who were holding the barbed wire open with their hands were reduced to rags, and a middle-aged soldier who was trying to throw a grenade fell down while holding the grenade and was blown to pieces. However, the number of enemies was greater than expected, and in the end, only a few survived and entered the trenches. When he pulled the trigger on the back of the head of an enemy soldier who had jumped into the trench, a sound like a watermelon exploding was heard, and blood and brain matter splashed onto his face. After wiping the blood from my face with my sleeve, I was replacing the magazine when something fell in front of me. It was a grenade. Reflexively, my eyes fell on the corpse of the enemy soldier I had just shot. There was no time to waste, so I threw the enemy soldier's corpse onto the grenade. The body covered the grenade and the grenade exploded at the same time. I received a strong blow to my head and immediately lost consciousness. While all consciousness was turned off, no sound was heard. Only darkness and silence. "Oh, you're alive. Are you awake?" When I opened my eyes, I was lying on a cot. How happy I was when I realized that I had survived. He wasn't that afraid of dying because he had already tasted death 5 times. I'm just afraid of what happens after I die. The battle ended in victory for the Allies. The military doctor said that at first they thought he was dead and tried to bury him in a hole, but his body was warm for a corpse and when he checked he was breathing, so they brought him here. You are so lucky. I almost got buried alive. Is that so? Buried alive. I almost faced the same death again. As I stood up, I felt pain in my chest. Her headache was so severe that it felt like her head was tied with a rope. According to the military doctor, there was a small fragment lodged in his chest and his head appeared to have been hit by the explosion. All the fragments were removed, and there was no major problem with my head, so I was told it would get better as soon as I got some rest. By the way, you did an amazing job. You said you single-handedly knocked out 2 tanks and wiped out all the enemies that were flocking towards you? Witnesses say you took on dozens of people by yourself. He said he would have lost the battle if it weren't for you. Is that so? That's right. Considering your achievements, you should be awarded the Iron Cross at least. Oh, by the way, I don't know your name. Corporal, what is your name? This is Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler. I will report it to your unit first. A few days later, I was transferred to a military hospital in Aachen, mainland Germany, along with other wounded soldiers. The military hospital was definitely better than the medical centers at the front. I could lie down in a proper bed, there were more nurses than medics, and I couldn't hear the gunshots that were often heard. The most satisfying thing is the meal. The meals provided at the hospital were much better than those served at the front lines. It can't be helped that turnips are served at every meal, but unlike the front line where only turnips were eaten for 3 meals a day, bread and potatoes are served here, and sometimes meat is also served. Even though the drought was so bad, there was still something to do to watch the fish. Today, meat was served for the first time in a while, and everyone in the hospital cheered. The menu is grilled sausage, finely shredded cabbage and boiled kidney beans. The sausage had a strong fishy smell and was tough, but no one complained. In times like these where food is scarce, just being able to eat meat was a blessing. As I was slicing the sausage into thin slices with a knife and slowly savoring it, a newly wounded soldier who had arrived in the bed next to me from yesterday was lying down, saying he felt bloated. With half of that precious sausage left over. Would you like some? I have no appetite. Is this really okay? I'm sorry about this. What should I do? Does not matter. It's much better than throwing it away. How can you readily give such precious sausages to someone else? Do you have a big heart or are you really uncomfortable? Feeling sorry for no reason, I talked to him. Thank you for the sausage. What is your name? I need to know the name of the benefactor who gave me this precious sausage. By the way, I'm Adolf Hitler. This is Remark. Eric Paul Remark. At that moment, I almost spit out the sausage that was in my mouth. Remark? That Remark? The writer who left behind numerous masterpieces such as, and others, and went into exile abroad after directly opposing the Nazis? I was so embarrassed that I could barely speak. My God, that legendary author is right in front of me. Come to think of it, I heard that Remark was injured while fighting on the Western Front and was evacuated. Who would have expected that a man who would later become a dictator and a novelist who went into exile abroad after being oppressed for opposing that dictator would meet in the same hospital room? Things in the world were truly mysterious. "Hey, is there any problem?" Remark, puzzled by my silence, asked. "Oh, it's nothing. It's just that my name is similar to someone I know." Since Remark began to become famous in earnest in 1929, 11 years after the end of World War I, it makes no sense for me to recognize him. It was a roughly made-up lie, but Remark accepted it without question. "Okay. Were you close friends with that person?" I knew him a little bit. Should I call him a drinking friend's drinking friend? I had a friend whose future dream was to be a novelist, but I don't know where he would be or what he would be doing right now." "Is it so?" Remark's face unexpectedly brightened after hearing what I said. "What a coincidence. My dream is to become a novelist in the future." "Exactly?" Out of curiosity, I asked several questions. "Then, may I ask what topics you mainly plan to cover?" "I haven't decided on anything yet, but I plan to write about war someday. It's about this war that's happening right now." "Right. I feel like you have the temperament of a novelist for some reason. Because it looks like that. If you become famous, please remember my name." "Thank you for the compliment. Mr. Hitler, what do you plan to do after the war is over?" "I'm not sure yet. He only thought about surviving the war, so he never thought about anything after that. Actually, I have something else in mind, but there's no need to reveal it now." "Okay." I had many conversations with Remark afterwards, what he did before the war, what he went through during the war, etc. The next day, Remark left for surgery and another wounded soldier entered his bed. When I asked the military doctor who was making rounds where Remark had gone and who else had come, he said that he had been moved to another ward for treatment. So, I spent the time lying quietly as before, pondering the unexpected encounter. I did so. Which of these is Adolf Hitler? During morning rounds as usual, instead of a military doctor, 2 officers in uniform appeared in the hospital room and spoke. "What's going on?" "I am Adolf Hitler." The 2 officers immediately turned their heads towards me, then strode forward and put their faces in my direction. "You are Adolf Hitler?" "That's right." "Are you from the List Regiment of the Bavarian Army?" "Yes." "What is your rank?" "I'm a corporal." "I'm sure." The reason they suddenly appeared in the hospital room was because of me. "Congratulations, Corporal Hitler. Do you know that your work was even published in the newspaper?" "You mean in the newspaper?" "I was in the newspaper." "Okay. Looking at your reaction, it seems you didn't know. Anyway, can you walk?" "It is possible." "It's impossible to run." "It doesn't matter because all you have to do is stand anyway." "Get ready right now. The military uniform is in clean condition, right? Otherwise, we will prepare it for you." "Well, may I ask what's causing this?" "I don't understand at all. Marshal Hindenburg is coming here now. He is going to award you a medal himself." "Hindenburg?" The moment that name came out, everyone in the hospital room became excited. The nurses and other wounded soldiers who were snooping around outside the hospital room wondering what was going on were shocked as if they had been electrocuted the moment they heard Hindenburg's name. Paul von Hindenburg. A giant of modern German history who achieved a great victory over the Russian army during World War I, became president after the war, and had a tremendous influence on Hitler and the Nazis' rise to power. Because the war was still underway, he would have to wait a few more years to become president, but Hindenburg was already so famous that no one knew him throughout Germany thanks to his countless achievements on the Eastern Front. Hindenburg was so popular at the time that his birthday, October 2nd, was designated as a public holiday. Are you going to meet the Hindenburg? Is this true? When Hindenburg arrived at the hospital, there was a cloud of people waiting for him at the hospital's main entrance. This guy is so popular. Hindenburg smiled as he looked at the people who gathered to see him. It's happened dozens of times already, but I've never felt bothered by the large crowds. If that size isn't proof of his popularity, then what is? It's the real Hindenburg. General. Dismissal. Dismissal. Hindenburg waved at the crowds of people welcoming him and then went straight into the hospital. The reason he came to this small hospital today was to encourage the wounded soldiers and award them medals. There were dozens of photographers who came to take pictures of him. What's your name, young man? Ah, it's Anton, Excellency Marshal. How did you get that scar on your forehead? Stop fighting the French army. Right. Those scars are proof of your courage. Be proud. Marshal No walked around the hospital room, shook hands with the wounded soldiers, and asked them their names, ages, hometowns, and how they got injured. Newspaper reporters eagerly moved their pens, looking alternately at Hindenburg talking to the wounded soldiers and their notebooks, while photographers kept pressing the shutter. After visiting all the hospital rooms, Hindenburg headed to the top floor of the hospital for the medal award ceremony, which was the climax of the event. Medal recipients were standing at attention and waiting even before Hindenburg arrived. Oh dear. Because of this old man, our heroes have been bothered. No. Even light jokes seemed to sound different to them. He chuckled, shook hands with each recipient and presented them with their medals. Lieutenant Franz Boehmer, awarded the medal for leading his platoon in successfully covering the retreat of our troops. Captain David Ziskowski, as a military doctor, treats wounded soldiers with sincerity. Captain Herbert Halberstein, therefore awarded the medal. Those who received the medal saluted and answered the enemy's questions in loud voices. Before we knew it, it was the turn of the last medal recipient. Corporal Adolf Hitler, in a battle with the British Army, destroyed 2 enemy tanks and killed a number of enemy infantrymen, greatly breaking the enemy's will to go on the offensive and thereby contributing to the victory of our troops, so he was awarded the medal. Hindenburg, who was holding the last remaining first-class Iron Cross medal with hands the size of a pot lid, was shocked to hear that he was a corporal. Among the recipients of this medal, he was the only enlisted rank. What a friend. His rank is only a corporal, but he takes down 2 tanks. A very brave soldier. Thank you, Excellency Marshal. After placing a medal around the neck of a brave corporal, Hindenburg asked the usual question, did you say Adolf Hitler? So, where is he from? I'm from Pusan. No, I'm from Braunau. Hindenburg, who was deaf due to his old age, could not hear the first word Pusan that came out. However, I vaguely understood the term Braunau. Braunau. So are you Czech? Braunau am in Austria, where Hitler was born, and Braunau in the Czech Republic have similar pronunciations, so many people used to get confused. No. I am Austrian. Okay? I guess I was mistaken. But an Austrian is serving in the German army. It's such a big deal. Well, anyway, it's okay. What is more important than your place of origin is the courage to fight the enemy on the battlefield. Yes. You're right. I'm glad you're brave. It's like looking at myself when I was young. I wish there were more brave young people like you. Isn't that right? I think Germany needs you more than me. When Hindenburg heard those words, a smile spread across his face without even realizing it. I thought he was just a brave friend, but he has quite a gift of words. This friend is becoming more and more likable to me. This guy speaks so wonderfully. What did you say your name was? This is Adolf Hitler. Hitler. I will remember it well. Chapter 5. After meeting Hindenburg, people's attitude toward me changed. Since I was a war hero who was featured in the newspapers and even received a medal from the famous Hindenburg himself, everyone at the hospital gave me special treatment. Not only medics and nurses, but even military doctors. Certainly, the power of the medal was extraordinary. Even in the original history, Hitler was awarded the Iron Cross, first class, but we know that he did not meet Hindenburg. He wasn't even in the newspapers. Compared to Hitler in history, my current actions have changed slightly. I almost died, but this is a pretty good start. Just meeting Hindenburg and receiving a medal from him would be a huge plus point. In actual history, Hitler benefited greatly from the Iron Cross, first class, which he received while serving in World War I. Unlike most politicians who were in the safe rear during the war, Hitler, who was on the front line, actively used his war experience for publicity and succeeded in making a good impression on the public. What's more, he received a medal directly from Hindenburg? Game over. There's still a long way to go, but things seem to be getting easier. After fully recovering from my injuries, I did not return to my headquarters right away, but was sent to a supplementary battalion. It is said that the rule is that soldiers who are injured on the battlefield are sent to the main unit through a supplementary battalion. Sent to the supplementary battalion, I advanced from corporal to sergeant. The award of the Iron Cross, first class, for his achievements on the battlefield seemed to have had a decisive influence on his special promotion. I was suddenly promoted from corporal to sergeant and was in charge of educating newly enlisted trainees. It reminds me of my days at the army training camp. The fact that I would have to eat and sleep here for a month made me feel bleak. The difference from then was that now I was in a position to teach new soldiers. Fist. Listen carefully. The most important things on the battlefield are speed and insight. The faster you run and the faster you move, the less likely you are to get shot, and the more quick you are, the more likely you are to survive. Gas is heavier than air, so it remains below the ground. If you are in a pit or trench and are attacked by gas, do not take off your gas mask even if enough time has passed. If you have to, come up above the ground and take it off. Because just 1 meter can mean life or death. When throwing a grenade, be sure to pull out a safety pin and throw it. Don't be stupid and just throw it without pulling out the safety pin. The boys, who were at an age where pencils and notebooks were more appropriate than military uniforms, listened attentively to what I said. The problem is that the newly enlisted soldiers these days are either too young or too old. People who would normally be at schools or coal mines are now walking around the parade grounds wearing military uniforms. Because of this damn war. Despite squeezing out all the men in Germany, the war situation was still grim. The German army was repeatedly retreating from the Allied forces, and rationing became increasingly strict. What's for dinner tonight? Well, steamed turnips and sauerkraut. Fuck, again? It was the same thing this morning. I ate the same thing last night. Hold on a little. If we win the war, we'll be cutting steaks in Paris. Yes, once the war is over, we will say goodbye to these similar foods forever. Despite this, people still could not give up hope that there would be victory. The reason was the truce with Russia that had been concluded not long ago. The Romanov dynasty, which seemed like it would last forever, collapsed in a revolution, and the Communist Party, which took power, signed an armistice with Germany. The new Russian Soviet Republic had to hand over a huge territory, including the Baltic states, Poland, Belarus, and Ukraine, to Germany in return for an armistice, and the entire nation was enthusiastic about the great victory achieved on the Eastern Front. Extra. Russia signed the armistice. At last. Now the only ones left are the British and French. Haha, long live the victory. Long live Germany. Morale, which had been withering, soared through the sky again. The people began to have hope for victory, and the government also eagerly promoted this to give the people the impression that victory was just around the corner. Not only the people on the streets, but also the trainees and nurses had no doubt that Germany would soon achieve victory. Just as Russia collapsed due to revolution, revolutions will soon occur in France and England. From my perspective, who knows the future, it was an absolutely ridiculous idea. October 24, 1918. In the end, is this the only way? There is no other way in the current situation, Your Excellency. German Naval Chief of Staff Reinhard Scheer and Commander of the High Seas Fleet Franz von Hipper prepared the final operation. Although they succeeded in overthrowing Russia, Germany's defeat was virtually certain. The number of men in the country was on the verge of drying up, and food and ammunition were also on the verge of running out. On the other hand, the Allied powers are overflowing with ammunition and food thanks to the United States, a huge water supplier. In addition, the Allied forces were several times larger than Germany's. Now that the possibility of victory had disappeared, it was necessary to deliver a final blow to the enemy in order to gain even a slight advantage in the ceasefire negotiations. The German Navy planned to mobilize all its remaining power to break through the English Channel, strike the British mainland and the Belgian coast, and engage in combat with the British fleet off the coast of the Netherlands. From anyone's perspective, it was no different from a suicide attack with a slim chance of success. Break through the English Channel, go up the Thames, and attack the British mainland? Does this make sense? Fuck it, just say hello. Why do we have to do this crazy thing? I don't do it. When this reckless plan became known, the sailors were all shocked. And I was angry. The anger of the sailors, which had built up as they became dissatisfied with the long war, tight rations, increasingly severe government oppression, and orders from their superiors, finally exploded. November 3rd, Your Excellency, Your Excellency. We're in big trouble. What's going on that's making such a fuss? The sailors have mutinied. Sailors revolted in the German port city of Kiel. We don't want to die. War is boring. Stop the war. The sailors who overpowered the officers and occupied the port soon poured into the city, and as the citizens who had accumulated dissatisfaction with the government and military, like the sailors, joined in, the situation grew out of control. Stop the war. Go away from the incompetent government. The Kaiser is responsible. Bring back to life my dead son. The spark that started in Kiel soon spread throughout Germany. Processions of people pouring out of their homes and workplaces filled the streets, and voices rang out in the air, demanding that the government that started the war take full responsibility and resign. Your Majesty, the people's anger has reached its peak. It is no longer possible to suppress their discontent. It is said that Congress has just declared a republic. If things continue like this, a civil war may break out. Your Majesty, as a subject, you are disloyal. The Kaiser, who lost even his remaining will amid the torrent of tragic news, chose to step down from the throne. On November 9, German Emperor Wilhelm II went into exile in the Netherlands. This transformed Germany from an empire to a republic. And 2 days later World War I ended with Germany's surrender. After losing the war, Germany not only had to withdraw its troops from all occupied territories, but also disband its existing troops. Because the Treaty of Versailles restricted not only armaments but also the size of the army, even those who had been in the army before the war had to leave the army. Not only the boys and middle-aged men conscripted during wartime, but also the battalion commanders of supplementary battalions, company commanders, and military officers who had been soldiers before the war broke out had to take off their military uniforms. But I wasn't. Unlike those who were forcibly kicked out of the military, I was given a chance to choose. Sergeant Adolf Hitler, I have received orders and have arrived. You're here. Take a seat. When I opened the door and entered the conference room, 3 officers were sitting at a long table. One was a colonel, the other 2 were a sergeant and a sergeant, respectively. These are probably people whose abilities were recognized by their superiors and who were allowed to remain in the military. You know why you were called, right? Yes. I will give you a choice. You deserve to stay in the military. Of course, if you want, he can leave the army. No one is forcing you, so do whatever you want. Unlike others, thanks to the medal I wore around my neck, I was able to remain in the military or leave the military purely of my own will. If it weren't for this medal, I would have been a civilian by now. You can go out and find something you want to do. It's good to remain in the military. However, due to the circumstances of the country, we cannot give the same salary as before. Maybe for a while. You have to take that into account. Staff Sergeant. What are you going to do? Answer honestly. I am. It was already decided before I was called. My choice. I want to stay in the military. I had planned to leave here someday for future plans, but that wasn't right now. At least you won't have to worry about sleeping and eating while waiting for that day. Although it is only for the time being. Right. I understand. You can just leave now. Sergeant Hitler. This left me in the army as Hitler's Sergeant Chapter 6. Germany in 1919 was in a state of chaos, like the Republic of Korea right after liberation, as it not only lost the war but also had to pay huge reparations. Communists who were crazy about the Russian Revolution were trying to turn Germany into a communist country, while retired soldiers who were discharged but could not find jobs gathered together and formed paramilitary organizations such as the Free Corps and Iron Helmets to engage in gun battles with communists. It was a daily routine. It was literally 5 minutes before the game started. The country was in this state, so of course the military had a lot of work to do. Sergeant, wake up everyone in your squad. What happened again this time? They say communists started a riot in the city. That happens all the time, right? Isn't that under police jurisdiction in the first place? Even the police couldn't handle it this time and asked for our support. We have to be there within 10 minutes, so hurry up. Many times, they were dispatched to catch communists who were demonstrating or rioting. Even though I was on vacation, I had nowhere to go and I didn't have much money, so I was spending my days sleeping in a bed at the official residence. Finally, that day came. Sergeant, you have work to do. The major, who identified himself as a member of the Army's Information Operations Staff, gave me a special mission. You probably know that many political parties, including communism, have emerged recently. Yes, that's right. So, I think you should check out one of these organizations. Have you heard of the German Workers' Party, Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, DAP? I know. Isn't his the old name of the Nazi Party, which was an ordinary, no-frills political party before joining Hitler, but later became infamous for causing World War II and the Holocaust? According to a report from the Ministry of Information, it is said that it is not a risk because it is a very small and medium-sized political party, but you never know. Originally, communists like Lenin started out in small gatherings. Your mission is to find out what kind of organization they are and what they are planning. Although he spoke in grandiose terms, there is something the major misunderstood. The fact is that this organization, the German Workers' Party, is a political party that would have remained a dud for the rest of its life if it had not been for Hitler. How long have I waited for this moment to come? It was really difficult to hide my excited expression. I immediately headed to the warehouse where the German Workers' Party often meets. Like many political parties that emerged in the early days of the Weimar Republic, the German Workers' Party, which had no money, rented an old warehouse and held party debates. It was a debate, but in reality it was all about drinking beer and swearing at the government. The warehouse was converted into a pub so that ordinary citizens could order alcohol. I sat down in a corner, ordered a beer, and looked around, when I saw a familiar face. So, we must also make good use of the current situation. Only then can you receive public attention and engage in full-fledged politics. Over there, the bespectacled man sitting in the middle seat and talking intently was Anton Drexler, the current leader of the German Workers' Party. This was our second meeting, having met once in our previous life. The government is doing nothing these days. They can't even control the prices and let the commies run wild. They are all in the same company as communists. That's right, that's right. That is correct. Cancer. As I was finishing the beer I ordered, a man stood up and spoke passionately. Was that person Professor Baumann? It's already been a few decades so it's hard to remember. We cannot leave our fate in the hands of a rotten government. If we don't want Munich to become a den of commies like Russia, we must become aware of it now. That's right. So, Bayern must become independent. So that we don't have to continue to suffer at the hands of that incompetent government. Isn't that right, everyone? Widely. After drinking the last sip of beer, I put the glass down loudly and stood up, all eyes turned to me. We are all German? Are you Nishu? Everyone looks confused as an uninvited guest suddenly bursts in. Either way, I looked directly at Professor Baumann and refuted his argument. Bavaria should become independent? Are you sane? You should be ashamed of yourself for trying to start another life when even if you get together right away, it's not enough. Only then can this country stand properly? Just think about it. What? Germany is in crisis now. Unemployment is rampant, and communists are running wild. In such a situation, if independence is claimed, what good will other regions have to remain in this country? You and I will both become independent. Just like that, Germany will disappear from the map. What's important now is not Bavaria's independence. We need to think about how to bring Germany back together and how the German people can unite under one value beyond ideology and origin. Professor Baumann left in a cold sweat. But the rest of the people remained in their seats and stared at me as if they were under a spell. Drexler and his comrades, of course, the person sitting in the corner drinking beer and chewing on pretzels, the waiter taking orders, everyone's eyes were on me. When I finally got the chance to pour out the words I had been holding back for the past few years, my heart swelled. Some of the people here have fought on the battlefield like me. Anyone who has ever served in the military knows how important unity is. But, independence. Don't you know that this is exactly what our enemies want most? If you insist on independence while knowing that, it is truly shameful, and if you insist on independence without knowing that, it is foolish. Are you satisfied with your current situation? If you are a person with normal judgment, of course that would not be the case. If Germany is to regain its former status, everyone must come together. Instead of insisting on independence, we should join forces. There is only one thing you must know. The fact is that we are all German. Never forget this one thing. Okay then. The moment I finished my speech and was about to take my coat and leave, for a moment, I knew it. Drexler stopped me. Sir, what is your name? Adolf Hitler. Drexler was standing with the look on his face that a person would make when he happened to find a bundle of money among a pile of trash while walking down the street. The skill of speaking is an art. I think he speaks better than most politicians. Who did you learn it from? I never learned anything from anyone, I just taught myself. In fact, Hitler created his own speaking technique solely through self-study, and it became a legend. I can't believe I achieved this level of skill through self-study. I think you have a natural talent for public speaking. Thank you for the compliment. He took out a thin booklet from his pocket and handed it to me. This is a guidebook introducing our party. Please read it once and come back anytime if you have any interest in politics. Our party always welcomes talented people like you. It is said that Hitler scoffed when he first received Drexler's proposal. That day, he wrote in his diary, "To my great regret, these people, whose party funds are equivalent to a child's pocket money, will accept me, so you can see how much Hitler looked down on them." That's because the German Workers' Party was such a poor political party that even its political expenses depended on voluntary donations from its members. If Hitler had remained in the military, history would have been very different from what we know, but he soon changed his mind, left the military, joined the German Workers' Party, and later became the dictator we know. I have no way of knowing what Hitler was thinking when he decided to join the party, but at least I had already made up my mind. Are you serious? I can't tell you in detail, but it's because I have something else to do. Huh? I can't help it. Because I have no right to stop you from making your own choices. Anyway, I understand. I hope you stay healthy. Thank you so much. The application for discharge was accepted without a hitch. With this, I transformed from Hitler's sergeant to civilian Hitler and immediately went to see Drexler. As expected, Drexler greeted me with a big smile. Welcome. I definitely knew you would come here. I joined the German Workers' Party. Party member number is 555. It meant that he was the 55th member of the German Workers' Party. As I became an official member of the party, I first changed the name of the party, just like Hitler did in history. Let's change the party name? Okay. The existing name has too little impact. You have to make a strong impression to stick in people's minds, but that's hard to do with your current name. Let's change it to a name that can be recognized a little more strongly. Drexler was somewhat uncomfortable with my suggestion to change the party name. When he asks to change the name of the party he invented, of course there is no way he will do it. However, perhaps he thought that it would be difficult to attract people's attention with his current name, so he did not oppose my proposal. Good. But change it to what? I can't think of anything. Don't worry. Because I have something in mind. Can you tell me what that is? Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, Step. Chapter 7. The road alone. Now that the party name had changed, the next task was to attract party members. After giving several speeches at the former warehouse, the number of people increased considerably, perhaps because they had heard the rumor. About 10 to 20 people. Since there were only a few people coming, word of mouth alone had its limits. Deciding that other means were needed, I immediately led all party members out into the streets. What we did when we went out into the streets. Teacher, please read this. Kids, go home and show your parents. It was handing out leaflets. I'm doing all the part-time flyer jobs here that I never did in my previous life. Although it may seem a bit mundane, leaflets were a common promotional method in a time when there was no internet or even TV. As a result of handing out leaflets to anyone passing by, regardless of age or gender, a certain number of people gathered at the next rally. Estimated size is about 80 people. As people gathered, I went up to the podium. People gathered after seeing the leaflets I handed out, but they didn't show much interest in me yet. They just talked to the person next to them or show more interest in the beer glass in front of them. Before going up to the podium, I quietly looked at the audience. From retired soldiers in military uniforms, workers and old women in greasy clothes who clearly work in a factory, students who appear to skip school because they don't want to go to school, and even homeless people. All kinds of people were gathered together. I looked around the audience slowly, with my eyes focused, and then began my speech. First of all, I would like to thank everyone who took time out of their busy schedules to attend this event. My name is Adolf Hitler, a former soldier who fought on the front lines for the German Empire, and now a member of the National Socialist German Workers' Party. The speeches began, but some still showed little interest to me. But I wasn't embarrassed. The real match starts now. Can you hear me, everyone? When the decibel level was suddenly raised, several people were seen turning their heads in shock. What do you think our biggest problem is? That's indifference. Even when the country was in crisis, we chose to become blind, focusing only on what was in front of us and losing interest in our country and society. If no one cares, what's the point? The result is today. Today is the day. This is the result of our indifference. The speech ended successfully. At a rally held 2 days later, 120 people gathered. The small warehouse quickly filled up with no room to move. But people stood patiently, without complaint, waiting for me to speak. My heart pounded like crazy at the fact that hundreds of eyes were looking at me. I feel more nervous than when I was on the battlefield. But I know. If you become intimidated by everyone's gaze, it's the end. After taking a deep breath, I blurted out the words I had repeated dozens of times in my head. Then he placed it on her tongue and fired it as if yelling. Everyone, as you all know, our fatherland, Germany, is currently in crisis. Millions of young people have sacrificed their only lives for the well-being of their country and the future of their people. However, we failed to repay the sacrifices of those who sacrificed their lives for our country and fell on the battlefield. Due to the defeat in the war, we lost our colonies and territory, our economy collapsed, and countless people lost their homes and jobs and are now wandering the streets. Is that all there is to it? Countries around the world are busy mocking us, ridiculing us, and looking down on us, calling us castrated pigs. What's even more miserable is that everyone in the country is taking that fact for granted. What do you think is the cause of all this? That's right, they are communists. Are you Lenin, their leader? Then someone in the audience shouted. He's Jewish. If it had been the real Hitler, he might have agreed with that statement, wondering what it was like. But not me. Even though I am now in Hitler's body, I am me. I did not pathologically hate the Jews like Hitler did, and I had no intention of scapegoating them and putting all the blame on them. Some people may think it's communists, others may think Jews are the cause. But it's not the answer I thought it would be. Then what is the answer? My answer is. I paused here on purpose. Because I know it will be more effective that way. We are ourselves. What? What does that mean? If you're going to talk nonsense like that, come down quickly. The audience seemed perplexed by my answer, and some impatient people shouted at me to fuck off. The party members below the podium also looked embarrassed. You might be wondering what on earth he was thinking when he said something like that. Don't worry. Because I have a plan. Why are you denying my answer? I wonder why. The enemy is within us. That is precisely our weakness and indifference. As he confidently continued his speech without changing his expression, the people who had been pointing and shouting just a moment ago fell silent. The weakness of saying, we can't do it, let's stop now led this country to defeat, and the indifference that said, what can I do with my interest in politics? I am the only one is what allowed the Communist Party to become a parasite on this country. Even at this very moment, communists are spreading like cholera, making Germany sick and shaking the foundations of society. Their goal is only one, to bring about a civil war in Germany, just as Lenin did in Russia. Do you really want that kind of future? No. Unless you are communists, no one would want such a dark future. So why do we just sit by and watch as they try to destroy our future? Now is the time for all of us to come together. Although our individual power may be weak, united as one we are more powerful than anything else. The owner of the country is not those in power, but you, the people. Let's show it to those who look down on us and want to destroy this country. United we are strong, the German people are by no means weak, and Germany can rise again. Like a volcano exploding, thunderous applause and cheers erupted. As the rumor about me spread quickly, not only the number of people coming to listen to my speech but also the number of people wanting to join the party increased exponentially. Naturally, people's donations increased, and we were no longer able to rent a large auditorium or a luxurious restaurant to give speeches, rather than an old warehouse. It was no exaggeration to say that things had changed 180 degrees compared to the days when party members depended on their own money. I saw at least one person properly. With a satisfied smile, Drexler sliced the steak and brought it to his mouth. It was an unimaginable luxury, considering that just a year ago, meals were made with boiled potatoes or turnips. This is all thanks to you, Hitler. Thanks to you, I can enjoy all these luxuries. Drexler, who lived a modest life as a locksmith, said it all seemed like a dream. I smiled lightly and agreed to that. Thank you for the compliment. But it's still a long way off. You're probably not satisfied here, are you? Is that possible? By nature, human greed has no end. Mashed potatoes were placed on steak pieces soaked in gravy. The juiciness of the beef and the mild taste of the boiled potatoes combined to gently embrace the tongue. Wow, this is it. As I was washing my hot tongue with wine, Drexler lowered his voice and asked. I'll just ask you one question. Say it. How far is your goal? To what extent? That's right. I paused for a moment as a waiter approached me. As the waiter set down the plum pudding topped with honey-poured apples and pears and left, he spoke in a low voice so that only Drexler could hear. It's everything in the world. While my friends who were in charge of the party's treasurer spent several days and nights wondering how to manage the increased donations, I thought about what to say in my next speech and Drexler chose a place to hold the rally. Once the meeting location was decided, party members put up posters on the streets to announce when and where the meeting would be held, and people flocked like bees. Nice to meet you, everyone. This is Adolf Hitler. Some of you may have seen me before, and some of you may have only heard of me through rumors, but this is your first time seeing me. Every time I see you, I feel joy and excitement, but at the same time, I feel embarrassed. When I first spoke, I could see each and every person's face, but now there are so many people that I don't know where to put my eyes. Ha 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 ha. First of all, it is effective to start with a few light jokes. That way, you can relax people and at the same time make the counter behind you more powerful. Communism does not suit Germany. Have you seen water and oil mixing? Communism is an ideology that only looks good on the outside, but in reality only leads to violence and destruction. You don't have to go far to see Russia. Lenin and his minions claim that they created a revolution and freed the people, but in reality, they killed countless people in the name of realizing the justice they advocated. Simply because their thoughts are different from theirs. How can such barbaric ideas fit in with Germany, a great civilized country? We, Germany, are a great country. It is a country at the center of Europe and destined to lead the world. Although the war is lost and the whole country is in chaos, this is only a fleeting growing pain. If you are together, the hardships you are experiencing now are just small hardships that can end with you looking back on the past and saying, there were times like that. Hitler. 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 What was an Ofril's political party that was nothing more than a gathering of idiots has suddenly transformed into a large and well-known political party in Bavaria. Naturally, people lined up to join the Nazi party, and among them were some with unique backgrounds. My name is Ernst Röhm. Nice to meet you. Welcome, Mr. Röhm. Adolf Hitler. The first person we met was Ernst Röhm. An active captain in the German National Guard, Reichswehr, and a man who will serve as the head of the assault troops, SA. Nice to meet you, Mr. Hitler. Rudolf Hess, I came here after hearing your speech. It's an honor to meet you. Nice to meet you too, Hess. I am more honored. Rudolf Hess. Hitler's closest associate who wrote Hitler's autobiography. However, by the time Hitler came to power, his presence had faded and he was pushed out by his secretary, Martin Bormann. During the war, he flew to England alone in a Bf-110 fighter plane, saying he would sign a peace treaty with England, and was taken prisoner. In the original history, It was no exaggeration to say that Hess was the German version of Heer management, but due to past aggressions, the perception of Hess has changed slightly. This is because when the Wehrmacht launched a coup, it was Hess who was shot and killed along with Goebbels while trying to evacuate me. That's why I was happy to meet him again. This may have been Hess' first time meeting me. My name is Gregor Strasser, Mr. Hitler. This is my brother Otto. I can't believe my brother is coming to see me at the same time. I think I'm quite popular too. Gregor Strasser and his younger brother Otto Strasser, leaders of the left wing of the Nazi Party. His older brother, Gregor, was purged because he was loyal to Hitler but opposed him over the party line, while Otto, unlike his older brother, fled to a foreign country and survived until the end by engaging in anti-Nazi activities. Will these brothers meet the same fate in this return? Or will I live a different life? What kind of life they will live will depend on my choice. I am Ernst Hanfstaengl, Mr. Hitler. The name of this mafia boss-looking man is Ernst Hanfstaengl. Just looking at his face and size, he looks like he can hit 500, but he is an intellectual among intellectuals who graduated from the famous Harvard University in the United States. He met Hitler and supported him in the early days of the Nazi Party, but later his relationship with Hitler soured and he went into exile in the United States. In fact, his ex-wife and son were big fans of Hitler, so they stayed in Germany. Hanfstaengl, whose family was wealthy and who was also a member of the upper class, had close relationships with many Bavarian political and business figures. He took me to parties and various gatherings and made me meet people from the upper class. One of the relationships that arose that way is: my name is Adolf Hitler. My name is Göring. Hermann Göring. I heard a lot of rumors, but this is how we meet, he. Nazi Germany's eternal X-Man, Hermann Göring. This brings together all the basic options. Chapter 8 Hull Riot 1, January 1923. France and Belgium occupied Germany's Ruhr industrial zone to forcibly collect the compensation stipulated in the Treaty of Versailles. Following the government's strict orders, the National Guard had no choice but to watch helplessly as the Franco-Belgian combined forces crossed the border and advanced into the Ruhr. Thanks to this, France and Belgium were able to occupy the Ruhr, the heart of German industry, without shedding a single drop of blood. The occupation of the Ruhr brought shock and humiliation to all German people, regardless of whether they were on the right or the left. Germans in the Ruhr attempted to resist the occupying forces through sabotage and guerrilla activities, but the occupying forces responded by arresting hundreds of Germans who had participated in sabotage and shooting about 130 of them. It was a rare incident in which another country's army arbitrarily entered the country, arrested its own citizens, and even shot them to death, but the Weimar government only limited itself to perfunctory protests and induction of strikes. The German people were angry at the government's helplessness, and Hitler planned to use that anger to seize power. The so-called Munich Uprising. Another word for it is a beer hall riot. Hitler's plan, imitating Mussolini's march to Rome a year earlier, was to seize control of the Bavarian state government, then march to Berlin with a stormtrooper and supporters and seize power with the support of the people. You can get the idea just by reading the above, but it is a plan as shabby as that of an elementary school student. Unlike Mussolini's National Fascist Party, Hitler and the Nazi Party were only one of many right-wing parties that existed in Germany, and even they were only active in Bavaria and had little connection with other regions. Let alone public support, public interest was low. Above all, the Nazi Party did not have the force absolutely necessary for a coup. At that time, the Nazi Party's strength consisted of 10,000 party members and hundreds of shock troops armed with pistols and clubs. Although the size and armament of the National Guard was limited by the Treaty of Versailles, it was still able to easily suppress crude militias such as shock brigades. It was a plan so sloppy that it would be a waste of time to explain it any further, but Hitler was convinced that it was a reasonable plan, so he put it into practice and it ended miserably. I plan to follow Hitler's disastrous mistake. November 8, 1923, 8 p.m. The rally was held in the beer hall of the Burger Brau Keller in Munich. The rally was attended by many prominent figures from Munich and Bavaria, including Bavarian Governor Gustav Ritter von Kahr, Bavarian Police Chief Hans Ritter von Caesar, and National Guard General Otto von Rosso. Party leader. Emil Morris and Julius Schreck, who had gone to scout, returned. Said. We have confirmed all three, including Kahr, sir, and Rozov. Right. Good job. For reference, to explain Morris and Schreck, both were Hitler's drivers and one of his closest associates, involved in the establishment of the SS along with Himmler, and both had the characteristic of growing toothbrush-shaped mustaches on their philtrums like Hitler. Unlike Morris, a handsome man with a slim face and sharp jawline, Schreck's face was so similar to Hitler that one might think he was his brother. Schreck died of meningitis in 1936, but Morris survived the war safely and died in 1972, enjoying a long life. The story went in a different direction for a moment. Anyway, after completing all preparations, we looked at each other face to face and pledged to make the revolution a success. Are you ready, Your Excellency? Of course. Former German Imperial Army Captain Erich Ludendorff was also present. He is a master general who teamed up with Hindenburg to give the Russian army unforgettable memories at Tannenberg, and is also a person who participated in the beer hall riots in real history. Even though he only played the role of a face madam, Ludendorff was widely known throughout Germany as a master general, so Hitler is said to have treated him with respect. After completing all preparations, I took out the Ruger P08 pistol. This cool and heavy feeling. It's been a while. Come on, let's go. 8:30. What are you doing now? Carl looked embarrassed when he saw the stormtroopers suddenly appearing in the beer hall. Can't you tell by looking? What on earth? I said, looking around at the stormtroopers surrounding me. Attempting a revolution. Revolution? What nonsense, everyone. I went up to the podium, ignoring Car's protests. The attention of the rally attendees, who were taken aback by the sudden situation, all turned to me. I immediately raised my pistol, pointed it into the air, and pulled the trigger. A heavy gunshot echoed through the beer hall like a lion's roar. As of this moment, I declare that the revolution has begun. The stormtroopers shouted in unison. The wind catchers who had been placed among the attendees also shouted and encouraged people to respond, thinking that this was the time. The current administration is like a parasite that is eating away at Germany. When the French army arbitrarily occupied our territory and murdered our people, the government just sat back and watched. How can a country's government do this? Are you going to live your whole life as a slave? Or would you like to join the revolution with me and change this rotten world? If we all work together, nothing is impossible. Now is the time for everyone to stand up. Let's go, everyone. Let us march on Berlin, drive out the traitors, and create a true government for the German people. We will never be defeated. After declaring the dissolution of the Bavarian state government and the establishment of a new government, I took the trio, Carr, Caesar, and Rosov, into a small room inside the beer hall. Although they had no choice but to be dragged in due to the attention of the stormtroopers, the three showed a stubborn attitude and resisted. Is everyone sane now? Do you think you can do something like this and get away with it? Stop fooling around and let us go right away. If you let us go right now, we'll make it right for you. Guys, there seems to be some misunderstanding. Not only I, but also His Excellency Ludendorff, planned to join in the revolution. His Excellency Ludendorff? When Ludendorff's name came up, the three people's eyes wavered. You wouldn't have expected that the famous war hero would be with Nabulani, the representative of a minor political party. I don't expect much from you. All you have to do is tell people that you agree with us. It's very simple. It's easy to say, but the three people, who didn't know that they would be held accountable for doing something like that, looked dumbfounded. However, the law is far away and the pistol in front of you is close. If you go all the way, this idiot in front of you might do something. Maybe it's good? The three looked at each other, but couldn't think of a suitable move. Pride or life? If you choose one, you will lose the other forever. We don't have much time. Please give me a confirmation quickly. I understand. I will join your will. In the end, between pride and life, it was life that won. It's a wise choice. We sincerely appreciate your cooperation. I bowed my head to them politely and left the room. What happened? Goring, wearing a stalem and holding a Mauser C96 pistol in his hand, approached and asked in a whisper. Whatever. They said they would cooperate with us. It's a success. Eventually, the trio stood up on the podium with gloomy faces and briefly declared that they would join the revolution. From anyone's perspective, it was an unintentional declaration, but it was enough. Whatever the reason, the consent of the Bavarian state government was obtained. Following the trio, Ludendorff went up to the podium and gave a short speech in support of the revolution and that he would also join the new government. While thunderous applause filled the beer hall, I went up to the podium again, holding my glass of beer. Then, I drank the dark beer in my glass in one go. As the cold beer went down my esophagus, I quickly got drunk. The empty beer glass was thrown to the floor and shattered. We will definitely win. Sieg Heil, long live the victory. Sieg Heil. At the same time, stormtroopers led by Rome attacked major government offices in Munich. Rome informed me that they had captured the police station and the National Guard headquarters and barracks without any damage. I could see Rome's smiling face over the phone. Success, success. It's so easy, it's mind-blowing. Well, I see. Good job, Rome. Please continue to pay attention. Stop worrying. As long as this body exists, there will be no failure. Yeah, no. Satisfied that everything was consistent with the process in my memory, I left the beer hall with my entourage to support other assault troops. I didn't forget to let go of the trio who said they would go home and say hello to their wives. Hitler, you idiot. The three, who were free again, laughed at Hitler's incompetence in releasing them. This is why people who can't learn aren't allowed. You let us go without even raising a suspicion. It's absolutely pathetic. That's right. The three returned to their respective residences and immediately ordered their military units to mobilize. It's time to go. Everyone, get your gear. Everyone ride. Don't procrastinate. National Guard soldiers who received the order to mobilize headed to the government office occupied by the assault troops. The assault force that received a counterattack from the National Guard had to withdraw hastily without even being able to fight properly. The commotion passed and morning came. Chapter 9 Hall Riot 2. I never thought they would betray me. The police station was also taken away. I took out all the weapons that were there, but the morale of the stormtroopers is incredible. What are you going to do now? Rome, who was quietly smoking a cigarette with a stiff expression on his face, asked me. The others also looked at me, wanting an answer. It's all my fault. I quietly closed my eyes and placed my hand on my chest, pretending to feel guilty about what had gone wrong. I backed off too much. The idea was to keep them from going anywhere because they might betray us. But they acted so complacent that it was stupid. I'm sorry. Now, you don't need to apologize. Because it was something none of us expected. When I apologized, Ro-M threw up his hands in embarrassment. Shrek, Morris. I have a favor to ask of you. Please speak, Mr. Party Leader. You guys take the wounded to the hospital. The leader of the party. Don't worry about me, come on. Shrek and Morris left with worried faces. Goring, Hess. Yes, Party Leader. You guys take your important documents and go to Hanfstaengel. Everyone else goes with me. November 9th at 11:30 a.m. I marched at the head with the leading party officials, including the Röhm and Strasser brothers and Ludendorff. Stormtroopers and party members followed us, armed. Passers-by stopped and watched our procession in silence. We marched through the square inches front of City Hall and in front of the military headquarters building. Stop, stop. Don't move. Armed military troops were camped in front of the military headquarters. Dozens of guns were pointed straight ahead, waiting for the order to fire. An officer on horseback, who appeared to be a commander, shouted through a loudspeaker. Tell the rebels. Hear all rebels. You are criminals who rioted illegally. Disband immediately gibberish. The officer seemed embarrassed by my shouting and put down the loudspeaker for a moment. I shouted without wasting time. We are rebels? A riot? Who said that? We just stood up for our cause. They took action to drive out a group of traitors from Berlin who betrayed the German people and only cared about their own safety while ignoring the reality the people were facing, and to return the rights of this country to its original owners, the people. As fellow Germans, you probably know what we want to say. So don't stop us. After speaking, I formed a scrum with my comrades on both sides. The soldiers became agitated when they saw us walking in a scrum, refusing to back down even after seeing the muzzles of our guns. However, the officer was adamant. Firing. As soon as the sound of firing was heard, dozens of gun barrels opened fire at once. At the same time, I felt the body of my friend next to me go limp. It's big. Otto Strasser collapsed, bleeding from the mouth. The blood that flowed from his chest where the bullet had lodged made his coat red. Retreat. Retreat. Everyone get back. The stormtroopers also fired and knocked down several soldiers, but the situation was irreversible. Ulrich Groff, my bodyguard on the far right, jumped out in front of me and shouted. Shoot, you bastards. Hitler, in front of His Excellency Ludendorff. Even after being shot in the thigh, Groff screamed and resisted with all his might. I picked him up and hurriedly dragged him back. Ludendorff stood still with a vain look on his face. Hey guys. Groff, take this guy to the hospital. All right. 2 stormtroopers rushed over and helped Groff. I ran forward again. Gregor was standing next to his already dead brother. He looked at me and shook his head as if he was wrong now. I didn't know if it meant my younger brother had died or if things had gone wrong. It's over there. It's Hitler. Stay still. Gotcha, guy. Gregor Stress, and Ludendorff were arrested on the spot. Otto Strasser died, and Röhm, Hess, Shrek, and Morris fled with party officials and were arrested by the police. Hanfstaengel was not arrested as he was deemed not to have anything to do with this incident. In Göring's case, he fled to Sweden, where his wife's family was. I was imprisoned in solitary confinement in Landsberg prison. There was no heating, and only 2 meals a day were provided, boiled potatoes and porridge that had cooled down and become as hard as a rock. It was a little better than the meal I had when I was rolling in the trenches on the Western Front, but it was a very disappointing meal for me, who was used to warm dishes. Every time that happened, I hypnotized myself and endured. Haven't you already experienced this once? It's part of the plan anyway. You just have to hold on a little longer. Little bit more. The year changed and it became 1924. On February 24th, when winter was coming to an end, I was sent to the Munich court to stand trial. The front of the courthouse was crowded with reporters and onlookers who came after hearing the news. Mr. Hitler? Tell me a little about the incident. Is it true that you threatened the governor with a pistol? Mr. Hitler, just one word please. While the police officers escorting me desperately tried to block the crowd of reporters, I kept my mouth shut and walked in silence. As we entered the courtroom, camera reporters fired their flashes all at once. Ludendorff, Rome, Hess, Strasser, Schreck, Morris and other arrested colleagues were sitting in the courtroom. After briefly greeting them, I sat down. Let the trial begin. I looked up at the judge. I was just wondering, but luckily it was a familiar face. Judge Georg von Neidhardt. Even in history, he was the judge in charge of Hitler's trial. I was worried about what would happen if someone else took charge of the trial, but I guess my worry was for nothing. Defendant Adolf Hitler, you are charged with treason. As the prosecutor began to speak, the once chaotic hall became quiet. Let me ask you something first. It has been confirmed that the defendant was born in Austria, not Germany. Which country is the defendant from? Please state the exact nationality of the defendant. It's started. Prosecutor, I'm sorry, but the question is vague and I don't understand. The question is vague? What do you mean? That's literally it. Does the nationality you just mentioned refer to the few letters written on the document you are holding, or to the blood flowing through my body? After I finished speaking, I looked at Neidhardt's face. Perhaps surprised by the completely unexpected remark, I relaxed my hand from around his chin. That's a completely unexpected answer. Okay, change the question. Does the defendant maintain his innocence? No. I am guilty. When he admitted guilt, the room became noisy again. The judge asked questions directly on behalf of the prosecutor. Guilty? Are you sincere? Yes, Your Honor. Why? You failed to carry out the will of the people and caused the death of innocent comrades, so what are you if you are not guilty? Keep talking. I will listen and decide. Judge, this is the court. The defendant had nothing to do with the trial, the prosecutor protested, but Neidhardt raised his hand to stop him. Things are going smoothly. Let me ask you all. If you retrieve something from the robber who stole it, is that person a thief? We were betrayed in 1918. From those who are our leaders. They betrayed the blood and effort of our people. The deaths of countless young people and the joys and sorrows of their families were made in vain. I wanted to regain the people's rights from those in power. Furthermore, we wanted to make Germany great again, which is our country's legitimate right. But I didn't achieve anything. The revolution failed, and I dashed the hopes of the German people who supported me. Therefore, I am guilty. Almost everyone in the courtroom stood up and applauded. Even judges. After that, it was like a breeze. Neidhardt, who had already fallen in love with me, allowed me unlimited arguments, and the courtroom instantly turned into a party meeting. I gave a speech as if I was shouting to the audience in the courtroom. The governor of Bavaria, Karl, promised me unlimited support and declared that he would join the revolution. But I became the defendant, and he became an audience member. If I am guilty, why is he innocent? What could be the reason? If those who betrayed the aspirations of the German people were innocent, no one would stand up for justice. Everyone, think about it. The sight of Germany washing away the wounds of defeat, rising again, and dominating the world. The German flag is waving again in Alsace and Lorraine, and East Prussia is once again connected by land. It is not a vain, unattainable delusion. It is a natural right that German citizens should enjoy and the spectacle that should exist in the world. I have been fighting on the front lines for the past 4 years. He fought so bravely that he was awarded the Iron Cross. Some people saw the Iron Cross on my chest and praised me as a hero. But I don't consider myself a hero. I am not a hero, I can't be a hero, and I don't intend to be one. There are real heroes. The millions of comrades who fell in the fields, seas, trenches, and mud during the 4 years of war are true heroes. Without their sacrifices, the country called Germany today would not exist. Berlin's politicians refuse to acknowledge the reality that their lives are maintained thanks to their sacrifices. The only thing on their minds is to suck the blood of the people and maintain their power. Are you going to just sit back and watch as they continue to rule this country? Or will we all rise together and rebuild this country with the power of the true people? Every time the speech ended, the court became a melting pot of excitement. Only a few audience members who were presumed to be Communist Party supporters and the prosecutor were sitting with sullen expressions, but almost everyone stood up and clapped and cheered, chanting my name. Hitler. 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 Suddenly, I realized that those shouts calling me Hitler were no longer awkward at all. Before I knew it, I was feeling joy at the sound of people cheering. Chapter 10 Fight on April 1st, the verdict was announced. Ludendorff was found not guilty and was immediately released. I was sentenced to 5 years in prison. When the ruling was announced, there was an uproar as the audience stood up and loudly protested. But when Judge Neidhart continued, the protests turned into cheers. After 9 months, you will be eligible for parole. Friends like Röhm, Strasser, and Hess all received short sentences. I was imprisoned again in Landsberg prison along with Hess and Morris, but the treatment was very different from before. Instead of living in a cold cell filled with mold and cobwebs, I ended up living in a heated VIP room with a bed and table. After spending time shivering in a solitary cell covered in dark stains, coming to a cell decorated with clean wallpaper and picture frames made me feel like I was in some kind of hotel. In addition, I was allowed unlimited visits and meals, and I was able to move around the prison as I pleased during working hours, wearing civilian clothes rather than a prison uniform. The guards treated me with courtesy and provided me with the same quality meals. I can't believe I got to experience the imprisonment of the CEOs of large corporations that I only saw on the news. It doesn't feel bad. I spent every hour of my working day taking Hess and Morris for a walk, while writing at the same time. Strictly speaking, I only did the dictation and Hess did the writing. In this way, it was completed. Mein Kampf, famous as Hitler's autobiography, was actually a book with such poor content that even Hitler himself dismissed it as dark history. The narrative was incoherent, and the content itself was rubbish that believed in Jewish conspiracy theories, so it was not well received at the time, let alone in the 21st century. There is even an anecdote in which Hitler said, "If I had known I would become Führer, I would not have written such a book," or even begged Speer, who was the Minister of Armaments and a close associate of his, not to read it because he would be embarrassed to death. However, the title I wrote of my struggle is the same, but the content is 180 degrees different from the original. There were no Jewish conspiracy theories that this was all because of the Jews, or unrealizable delusions like Lebensraum. Instead, it contained a forecast of the future world situation that mobilized all my future knowledge. How is it? Doesn't it seem like you're starting to get interested? Naturally, Hess and Schreck had a hard time accepting my prophecy. It was worth it because it was full of things that were completely unimaginable with their current knowledge and awareness. Hey, party leader. Do you really believe that the world economy will collapse in 5 years? Even Hess, who immediately took action without any refutation of what I said it in a tone of disbelief. I smiled lightly and answered his question. Okay. Although it may be hard to imagine right now, I am sure of it. And the economic collapse will begin in the United States. In 1929, the Great Depression occurred, which even people who were indifferent to history and economics would have heard about at least once. There are so many causes of the Great Depression that even in the 21st century, it is difficult to pinpoint this is the cause, and since my level of knowledge about the economy is not much different from that of the general public, it is difficult for me to explain in detail why the Great Depression occurs. However, the important thing was the prophecy itself that the Great Depression would occur. Did Nostradamus explain that this would happen for such and such a reason? I became famous just by saying something like this would happen in the future. Of course, it would be inappropriate to just write that the Great Depression would occur without any explanation, so I showed a level of sincerity by mobilizing all my knowledge and including everything that came to mind. Although it may be treated as nonsense now, in 10 years I will quickly emerge as a global prophet. He. The Great Depression will surely completely collapse the existing world order. At the same time, countries around the world will try to overcome the economic crisis in their own way. Large countries with many colonies, such as Britain and France, will try to use their colonies to escape the economic crisis, while countries with few colonies will try to escape the economic crisis using other methods. What is that method? Of course it's war. Go to war and take over another country's colony, or create a new colony to exploit the colony's resources and secure a market for your country's goods. And I predict, that country will definitely be Japan. Do you mean Japanese? Yes, Japan. It is a well-known incident that, when the Great Depression hit the country hard, the military took advantage of it to seize power and invade Manchuria. I said that Japan, which took control of Manchuria, would become even more arrogant and invade all of China, and would come into armed conflict with Western powers, such as Britain and the United States, who would try to stop it. Hey, party leader. There are some parts I don't quite understand. Tell me. You said that Japan is attacking Britain and the United States to continue the war with China, but I wonder if people think this makes sense based on common sense. I think the same thing. It was understandable that Hess and Schreck expressed their doubts. Common sense tells us that we are at war, but the choice to suddenly attack another country to continue the war is improbable. But Japan did something crazy. At the time, Japan needed more oil to continue the war with China. However, when the United States, which accounted for most of the country's imports, imposed a ban on oil exports, Japan decided to secure oil through war. I don't understand. It's normal not to understand. Japan was not normal, so they did exactly the opposite. In the case of Britain and France, he also wrote that although they are now the world's most powerful countries, the colonies that made them powerful countries will later hold them back. It is also said that to solve this problem, the colonies must be liberated and their own contradictions must be eliminated. In the case of Britain, it was rather meekly to give up its colonies and retreat, but France showed its ugly side to the end, befitting its nickname of Europe's bully. Representative examples include Vietnam and Algeria, both of which ended up being lost despite pouring a lot of war money and manpower into them. And it is so strange to say that China will become a superpower that dominates the world economy. Don't you know very well what kind of country China is? China in the 1920s was an underdeveloped country, not much different from how people in the 21st century view Afghanistan. Think about it. Would people believe me if I suddenly told them that an underdeveloped country like Afghanistan or Somalia, which cannot be considered a third-rate country, would suddenly become a power on the level of the United States or Russia in 70 years? They'll tell you not to talk nonsense. Okay. I know. That's why I said that. Yes. Currently, China is an underdeveloped country where warlords run rampant, the majority of the people are illiterate and cannot even find proper factories. The military, at best, is only at the level of the European military 30 years ago. However, China has the largest territory in Asia and is the most populous country in the world. In other words, there is infinite growth power. If a country with a large workforce, large territory, and resources were to experience true peace and begin to grow, would you be able to predict the results? In my struggle, I confidently wrote that Germany's current enemies are neighboring countries such as Britain, France, and Poland, but that in the future the United States and China will be bigger opponents than them. Like Hess and Shrek, people may not understand it right now, but over time, people's perceptions will change. However, there were quite a few things that were too far into the future, such as the internet, smartphones, or drones. For predictions, there must be a plausible explanation and some degree of reality in order for people to be convinced. But suddenly, try adding sci-fi elements such as robots or Mars exploration. Will people read it properly? Let's just ignore this guy and say he's a pure psychopath. Instead, it wrote in quite detail about the factors that people at this time could think about. The future of tanks and airplanes. It is said that these two weapons will be important elements that will dominate the battlefield of the future. At the same time, talk about battleships could not be left out. Battleships of this period were such important weapons that they were treated on the same level as nuclear weapons of the 21st century. Why? If it were a weapon that could navigate all the seas of the world, protected by strong armor, and had the firepower to destroy an opposing country's warship with a single blow, what would be other than a battleship? It is not for nothing that the Allies stipulated in the Treaty of Versailles that Germany could not possess battleships forever. However, after World War II, battleships lost their luster. Britain used an aircraft carrier to raid the Italian port of Taranto, turning the Italian Navy into a semi-military force. Japan was also inspired by this and actively used aircraft carriers to successfully attack Pearl Harbor. After losing most of its battleships in the Pearl Harbor attack, the United States had no choice but to use aircraft carriers instead of battleships to confront the Japanese military. In this process, the United States learned that aircraft carriers were surprisingly useful, and later placed more importance on aircraft carriers than battleships, defeating the Japanese army, which was buried in outdated big ship gun policy, and forcing its surrender. Knowing the knowledge of the future, I emphasize that the era of battleships was over and that the trend was aircraft carriers. Although it does not have tremendous firepower like a battleship, it can launch aircraft to attack at a distance that the battleship's main guns do not close, so it will be much more useful than a battleship in future naval battles. Lastly, he did not forget to include the reality Germany faces today, the direction Germany will take in the future, things to watch out for, and criticism of incompetent politicians. My struggle, which was completed one way or another, brought about great controversy, just as I intended. It is said that when Mein Kampf first came out, sales were modest. Sales of Mein Kampf began to surge in the 1930s, when support for Hitler and the Nazi Party began to rise. Until then, there were overwhelmingly more people who did not even know that such a book existed than those who knew about Mein Kampf. However, in this world where history was changed because of me, my struggle immediately emerged as a hot potato. There were many similar books that criticized the German leadership and presented division, so I managed to get through them. What caught people's attention was my prediction of the world situation. The world economy is collapsing all at once for various reasons. And in the US too? That sounds funny. Most people were reluctant to believe in the global Great Depression that I predicted. Excluding Germany, the global economy is in a tailwind, but suddenly there is an economic crisis. It was natural for people to treat it as nonsense. In particular, when it came to China's growth, people were busy ridiculing them for not having any other science fiction novels. China? China? Those uncivilized barbarians are controlling the world economy. Isn't this Hitler crazy? Maybe your ancestors are Chinese? However, several scholars who noticed China's potential early on published papers and actively defended my argument. Although it was only a minority, people's reactions gradually diverged as some scholars agreed with my argument. In particular, the reactions to Japan's ambition to invade Asia were different from the previous two predictions. Above all, Germany lost its Asia-Pacific colonies, including Tsingtao, to Japan due to its defeat in World War I. Although the perception of Japan was not very bad due to Japan's gentlemanly treatment of prisoners, it could not be said to be good, so my argument surprisingly received a positive response. Above all, the biggest event that made this book widely known was when my struggle became known in China through Chinese students studying abroad in Germany. Have you read Mein Kampf? My Struggle? What is that? It's a book written by a German named Adolf Hitler, and it contains tremendous content. Please read it. But I don't know German? I knew that would be the case and did my translation. During this period, the Chinese people were resentful of their country being treated as a third-rate country by Western powers, but it was also true, so they just groaned inside. However, a certain revolutionary appeared in Germany and wrote in his autobiography that China, even if it is treated shabbily for now, has great potential and will grow into a global power in the future, so it is natural that people will like him. Gukbang content works even in the 21st century, but what if it's the 20th century? And what if a foreigner who has nothing to do with China flies to China? When the illegal translation of Mein Kampf was introduced in China, the response was explosive. Although it was mainly read by intellectuals rather than the illiterate Chinese people, Mein Kampf gained worldwide fame as they began to spread the word about the existence of this book to the public and even to foreigners in China. My struggle is a ray of hope for the Chinese people. I sincerely hope that this book will be widely read not only by the Chinese people but also by all people in Asia and the world. Lastly, the popularity of Mein Kampf reached its peak when Sun Yat-sen, the father of China, mentioned this book. It's a success, a huge success. It's a huge success. This was what Max Salmon, who I met after being released from Landsberg prison, said. Max Salmon was a friend who was involved in the publication of Mein Kampf as the representative of a publishing company called Franzer. In actual history, it was Salmon who gave Hitler's autobiography the name Mein Kampf. What was the original name of Mein Kampf? It was 4 years of lies, cowardice, and foolishness. It's like looking at a modern light novel title. Anyway, my struggle became extremely popular in China, and as it spread to Japan and then through Japan to other countries around the world, my struggle was selling like crazy. It was a time when awareness of copyright was still rare, so many of the translations of my struggle on the market, especially in Asia, were illegally translated. However, even taking this into account, the sales volume of my struggle was beyond imagination. Thanks to this, the Nazi Party's finances were so strong that they did not have to worry about money for several years. Naturally, my position in the party became even stronger. Drexler, who served as party leader while I was imprisoned, eventually had no choice but to acknowledge me and step down as honorary chairman. But my friend, I don't know about you, but this is a much happier ending. In the original history, you rebelled against Hitler, but were sued for defamation and retired. And that was before the beer hall riots. However, in this regression, I clearly treated Drexler as the party leader, even if it was only superficial, and he did not conflict with me, perhaps because he was satisfied with his treatment. Isn't this what it means to be good to your sister and good to your brother-in-law? As Mein Kampf gained sensational popularity, the party's once waning popularity also rose again. Naturally, the number of people who wanted to join the party increased again, and among these were Nice to see you. My name is Paul Joseph Goebbels. There was also Goebbels, a master of propaganda and agitation unprecedented in human history. Chapter 11 Catch 1929 Lev Trotsky, who lost the power struggle with Joseph Stalin, went into exile. Eric Maria Remarque's masterpiece, an anti-war novel, has been released. And on Thursday, October 24th, nonsense. What is this? This is a scam. It's a scam. Saiba Ale. An incident occurred in the New York stock market, causing a sharp drop in stock prices. This event, later called Black Thursday, signaled the beginning of the Great Depression that changed the entire world. The Great Depression, which began in the United States, soon swept the entire world. The German economy, which had gotten back on track, fell into complete decline, and the streets were filled with unemployed people. People who could not endure the hardships of life and ended their lives began to appear in droves. Strikes and protests followed, and the Communist Party, whose popularity had waned, began to expand its influence. However, the popularity of our National Socialist German Workers' Party could not match. When the Great Depression mentioned in my struggle actually broke out, I became a world-renowned prophet. Before the Great Depression, he was called a bullshit expert, a revolutionary advocate, and an honorary Chinese, but not anymore. Now that the Great Depression had really broken out, no one dared laugh at me. I couldn't do that. My struggle sold like hotcakes, to the point that previous sales figures were easily ignored, and my position and the party's popularity increased even more. The following year, in the Weimar Republic general election held on September 14, 1930, the Nazi Party won 302 seats and stood tall as the largest party in the National Assembly. It is no longer an official political party in Bavaria, but has established itself as the largest political party in Germany. A year later, on September 18, 1931, Japan attacked China and took control of Manchuria. The Manchurian incident occurred. Although it was a sad event for the Chinese people and Chiang Kai-shek, the Manchurian incident was a significant boon to me. Hitler, what kind of person is this? Aren't you really from the future? How can it fit together so well? Even so, my awareness had already increased as the predictions of the Great Depression became a reality, but when Japan took over Manchuria, I came to be treated as a second Nostradamus. Did Eugene Kim feel this way? Even though she was a character in a novel, she had a rough idea of how it must have felt. And then the day came. May 30, 1932. I'm sorry about you, but I can't help it. I hope you understand. Heinrich Brüning was dismissed from his position as Chancellor by German President Hindenburg. If that is what Your Excellency means. I understand. Brüning opposed Hindenburg's decision, but did not show it outwardly. Even though he despairs of the reality that confronts him, he humbly accepts it. The relationship between Hindenburg and Brüning was not that bad. On the contrary, Brüning respected Hindenburg, and Hindenburg would often dine with Brüning or discuss important matters together. However, Brüning's economic policy aroused opposition from the German people, and he also had a major conflict with the Junkers over the land tax issue. Hindenburg, who had been one of the Junkers before he was president, could no longer appoint Brüning as chancellor. In this way, Brüning resigned from his position as chancellor. I hope you don't blame me too much. I want to keep you by my side, but if I do, something bigger will happen. I understand? Of course, Your Excellency. Hindenburg, who had both good and bad feelings for Brüning, held a farewell party for Brüning, even though he had cut off his head with his own hands. As the orchestra played, Hindenburg raised a glass of wine high. Let's all toast to our Prime Minister who has worked so hard. Brüning also raised his glass. The wine was of the highest quality, but to him it felt like wine-flavored poison. That day, Brüning returned home very drunk. When Brüning stepped down, the person appointed as his successor was Adolf Hitler, the prophet of the century. It's been a long time since we last met. It's an honor to meet you again, Your Excellency. Hindenburg had not forgotten his encounter with Hitler, who was a corporal, at a small hospital a dozen years ago. A friend who is brave and knows how to please his superiors. In addition, he is a man who not only predicts the future, but attracts attention from all over the world. Hindenburg became even more attracted to Hitler when he heard that Hitler had given up running in the presidential election a few months earlier. I heard that people around Hitler encouraged him to run for election, but he refused, saying he would not dare to confront his former superior. Due to this series of events, Hindenburg trusted Hitler more than anyone else. I'm only telling you this. Actually, I had no intention of becoming president. No, why? I've already served as president once, and I'm old, so I just want to rest comfortably. But people around me insisted that if I quit, Germany would fall. Is there any way to turn Germany into a place full of communists? Funnily enough, the people who pushed me were all commies. I still feel embarrassed when I think about that. Oh, shit. The support of the Social Democratic Party contributed significantly to Hindenburg's election, but to Hindenburg, who viewed the Social Democratic Party as a counterfeit communist party, the support of the Social Democratic Party itself seemed only a stain on his life. Your Excellency, you may think so, but I think a little differently. Why? In order to achieve your original intention, you must know how to join hands even with the enemy in front of you. If Your Excellency had not run, wouldn't it have been only good for the communists? Hey, if I hadn't run, wouldn't you have run? I won't deny it, but who dares be greedy for the presidency when you are here? If only you were sober. I chose the right person. Hindenburg laughed heartily. He admired his own eye for people. Congratulations. Congratulations, Mr. Party Leader. No, Mr. Prime Minister. The day after the Prime Minister appointment ceremony, I held a congratulatory party at my home to which party executives were invited. My thoughts were short, sir. How did you think of all that? Goebbels said. Goebbels urged me to run for president, but I declined his offer. In actual history, Hitler accepted Goebbels' suggestion and ran for president. Although the result was defeat, he was able to leave a deep impression on the public by finishing in second place in the number of votes. But there was no need for that here. If I run for president anyway, I will be defeated by Hindenburg, and in terms of popularity, there are very few people who don't know me. But is there still a need to harm the relationship with Hindenburg by running in the presidential election? My calculations were correct, and Hindenburg dismissed Brüning and appointed me chancellor. Now that you have become prime minister, this country will change. Göring, who was already drunk, said. I smiled silently and nodded. Göring, this guy, he talks a lot, but it gets even louder when alcohol is involved. Still, compared to his original history, Göring had changed to the level of a complete transformation. According to history, Göring was injured by a bullet in the testicle during the beer hall riot, and he took morphine to forget the pain and ended up becoming a morphine addict. Göring's morphine addiction became more and more severe, and he made increasingly harsh decisions, contributing to Germany's defeat. To prevent this situation, I deliberately sent Göring to the rear. As a result, Göring was not injured and did not touch the morphine. In addition, as a result of my ordering him to take care of his health and putting him on a diet, Göring was transformed into a middle-aged man with a level of beauty that women would fall for. Now you won't have to make fun of me for being fat, Göring. When the party was ripe, Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, approached. Dismissal? I have something to tell you. Would you mind for a moment? Well, sure. Let's go to a corner where people can't see, and Himmler gets to the point. It's a matter of Rome, Your Excellency. I knew it. I knew it would be like this. I know what you're trying to say. The military doesn't have a good view of them, right? You knew. This is information obtained through spies planted in the military, and there is a rumor going around publicly that something needs to be done with Lang and the assault corps. Oh, there are still many mountains to climb. Although he belonged to the anti-communist Nazi party, Rome, who paradoxically had socialist tendencies, advocated a second revolution. The second revolution he advocated was that industry should be nationalized and the property of capitalists should be confiscated and distributed to workers. Going one step further, he argued that a people's army should be created by merging the military with the shock trooper he led. Naturally, there was no way the military, dominated by Junkers, conservatives among conservatives, would have approved of Rome's nonsense. But anyway, I was also thinking about what to do with Rome. If we leave it like this, there will definitely be a big accident. That is a valid statement, Your Excellency. If you need anything, please call me anytime. As long as Your Excellency gives orders anytime, anywhere, okay, let's go and finish eating. Anyway, this guy is always trying to flatter me. No need, man. Chapter 12 Knight of the Long Sword, 1. Therefore, I hereby declare that the bill has been passed. Immediately after the appointment of Prime Minister, everything proceeded smoothly. With the active cooperation of the Central Party and the National People's Party, which were included in advance, the Enabling Act was passed without major setbacks. The Social Democratic Party and the Communist Party went on a rampage, claiming that it was illegal, but since the bill was passed, their protests were nothing more than a futile struggle. After the Enabling Act was passed, the Communist Party was declared illegal. The Social Democratic Party was also dissolved. However, in addition to the Centre Party and the National People's Party, minor parties such as the Bavarian People's Party, the National Party, and the Peasant Party were left behind. Although it was like turning a blind eye, there was a need to show foreign countries that we were inheriting the democratic system, at least formally, by leaving behind entities that could be called the opposition party. If history had gone by, they would all have been disbanded, but we should be thankful that it ended up like this. What did you say, Your Excellency? It's nothing. I guess I was talking to myself because I was tired for a while. Nothing to worry about. Look at my mind. I was talking to myself again. I really can't believe I still can't change my old habits. Aren't you pushing yourself too hard these days? Then he collapses. Nothing is more important than the Prime Minister's health, so don't overdo it. I think it would be a good idea to see a doctor this evening. It was a hastily made-up lie to ease the awkwardness, but Göring, Goebbels, and Himmler thought I was really tired and made a fuss. It's so burdensome that I'm dying. I can't say anything. If I get a nosebleed like this, I'm going to faint completely. That's it, that's enough. I will take care of my health, so let's stop talking. We were currently in a meeting about the disposition of Rome and the assault corps. It is clear that Rome contributed a great deal to his rise to power. However, Rome's increasingly arrogant attitude and the 3 million strong stormtroopers, which had grown too large, had now become the biggest headache for the Nazi Party. The military's movements are unusual right now. Thanks to Your Excellency's negotiation with them, the military expressed its intention to cooperate with us, but due to Röhm's interference, everything went astray. Göring repeatedly spoke angrily, as if just thinking about it made him angry. Even Goebbels, who was not on good terms with Göring, kept nodding his head in agreement with what he said, so it seemed like he really hated Röhm even if he hated him. Röhm, who was not particularly sociable, polite, or humble, made many enemies because of his personality. As I said, there are very few people in the military or even within the party who are close to Röhm. The only person they had a good relationship with was Hess, whom he had known since the early days of the Nazi Party, and even Hess was quietly listening to Göring's criticism, perhaps thinking that Röhm had recently crossed the line. Himmler, report to Your Excellency. Next in line for Göring was Himmler. These materials are information I obtained through spies planted within the military and the shock corps. The documents presented by Himmler contained the movements of Röhm and the assault troops, as well as the military's view of them. Röhm's actions are increasingly crossing the line. It is said that at a recent meeting, there were rude remarks about His Excellency and even criticism of the policy. The majority of the officers of the shock brigades agreed with Röhm's words. Among the executives, only Victor Luce told us this. Victor Luce. In actual history, he reported Röhm's actions to Hitler and gained his trust, and after Röhm was eliminated, he became the chief of staff of the Storm Corps. Afterwards, while transforming the assault brigades into a proper military organization, he died in a car accident in 1943. It is said that there is a lot of dissatisfaction with the shock brigades not only in the military but also within the police. They even asked him to hand over administrative authority, saying he would take over police work. After Himmler's remarks, it was Heydrich's turn. Reinhard Heydrich, the butcher of Prague and the blonde beast. He was a man who could be called the brains of Nazi Germany, who led and succeeded in numerous operations before being assassinated in the Czech Republic in 1942. Heydrich nodded lightly, then took out the files he had organized and explained them one by one. First, here is a list of bribes that Röhm has received. I ate too much. You pig. I almost burst out laughing at Göring's words. I don't know if it's someone else, but if you say it, I guess it doesn't matter since I'm not a pig anymore. Heydrich's explanation continued. From the list of bribes Röhm received, to those who asked him for favors, to Röhm's liaisons and Socialist Party members who were in secret contact with him. I couldn't help but be somewhat surprised by how much bigger it was than I expected. The conclusion of the meeting had already been decided. Röhm's execution. The idea was that any unreasonable bud should be cut off in advance. If we don't execute Röhm now, we don't know what the consequences will be later. Yes, Your Excellency. We must kill Röhm. In the original history, Hitler decided that Röhm should be purged, but he was quite hesitant to kill him, perhaps because of the affection of the past years. When Göring, Himmler, and Goebbels persistently insisted on Röhm's execution, they accepted it, but they still hesitated to dispose of Röhm to the extent that they even said that it would be better to keep Röhm alive and imprison him instead of killing him until the end. In the last regression, there was no need to worry about this. He marched next to me during the beer hall riots and was shot dead instantly. After Röhm died, Hess took charge of the assault force instead. Considering the future, Röhm should have died then. At least he wouldn't have died at the hands of comrades he trusted. Realistically speaking, as they said, it would be right to kill Lung and get rid of Huan in advance. I also plan to do whatever it takes to make this regression a success. It's very easy for me. All you have to do is say yes and the rest will be taken care of below. I don't have to lift a finger. Nevertheless, I instinctively hesitated at the fact that I had to kill a comrade with whom I had shared hardships for the past dozen years. Even though I am not the real Hitler, but an ordinary Korean living in the 21st century. Is this why Zheng is scary? Your Excellency, please make a decision. Göring said urgently. Himmler, Goebbels, Heydrich and Hess were all looking at me, hoping that the words they want will come out of my mouth. Ruun. Yes. He was a comrade who spent a very long time with me. Yes, that's right. Göring was taken aback because my answer was unexpected. Himmler, who was worse off, stepped forward. Dismissal. I know that Your Excellency has a close relationship with him. But this is unavoidable. Sacrifice is necessary for the greater good. What the SS imperial leader said is correct. If you keep Röhm alive because of past affection, you will definitely suffer in the future. Goebbels also came forward and supported Himmler. I sighed briefly. Yes. That's how it should be. Dismissal? Punish Röhm. Göring's face brightened as he finally received the answer he wanted. The corners of her mouth rose as if Goebbels, Himmler, and Heydrich were satisfied. That is a wise decision, Your Excellency. That's right. Today's decision will go down in history. Your Excellency saved Germany. Oh, kinda. I first informed Hindenburg of the plan to kill Rome. In history, Hindenburg first pressured Hitler by saying that it would be no fun unless Rome and the stormtroopers were killed, and he pressured Hitler through Defense Minister Werner von Blomberg to kill Rome. But that didn't have to be the case here. First of all, Hindenburg's trust in me was high, and I informed him before he said anything. As expected, Hindenburg was very happy to hear what I had to say. Okay, good idea. Such a thug needs to die, cancer. Hindenburg seemed satisfied and took a big bite of Baumkuchen, a traditional German dessert that resembles a donut. Oh my goodness, I chose the right person. I already don't like what Rum and his gang are doing, so I was wondering what to do with it. Even though you didn't say anything, you knew that Ro-M was a son of a bitch. It's great. It is something that must be done. Yes. Especially because he is a faggot. He was so old that he was a soldier who ate away at the country, so he was a faggot. The thought of having to rub up against the same man with my disgusting body with all the fat hanging down makes me lose my appetite for food. Well, I think you're eating better than I thought, even though you don't have a good taste for food. While Hindenburg munched on a handful of pretzels, I explained Rome's plan. Throughout the explanation, Hindenburg kept nodding his head as if he was satisfied. Anyway, you will take care of everything. I will only trust you. Thank you. Following Hindenburg, he also explained Rome's purge to Blomberg. As expected, Blomberg also strongly agreed. That is a very correct judgment, Mr. Prime Minister. Even so, he and his gang have been going too far these days, and I was wondering whether I should tell His Excellency about this, but I am impressed that you made the decision first. Although he is not as good as Goering, Himmler, or Goebbels, this man was also a Hitler fan to his core, so his skill at flattering was extraordinary. I'm starting to feel tired already. In any case, Blomberg said that he would actively support my plan by calling in military troops if necessary. Lol, how on earth have you lived so that everyone you meet wants to kill you? Today, Rome went about his business and attended meetings as usual, unaware that not only the military, but even his comrades who had been on the same page for a long time were planning to kill him. The upper echelons of the assault corps have long since been filled with close associates who only follow Rum's instructions. In reality, it was nothing more than a fan meeting where Ro-M was busy responding to what he said. I am very disappointed in Hitler. Rome, who appeared at the meeting with a lot of pomp, began the meeting with criticism of Hitler. I thought Hitler was a truly like-minded comrade, but I guess I had the wrong person. Rome was very dissatisfied with Hitler. Once Hitler came to power, Rome firmly believed that Hitler would fulfill any demands he had for his longtime comrade. But Rome's request went further than anyone could have imagined. His claim to hand over the duties and authority of the police to the shock brigades, disband the military, absorb them into the shock brigades, and then reorganize the shock brigades into the People's Army embarrassed even the Nazi Party executives who were in conflict with the military. Only Rome and his associates thought that their demands were a reasonable reward for their efforts. We have finally established a framework to start the revolution, but he is still hesitating. In the end, Hitler was no different from junkers and capitalists who only thought about serving their own interests. You're right. Chancellor Hitler cannot lead a revolution. Every time he heard the enthusiastic cheers of his subordinates, Rome became more proud. They were already casually making statements that were far beyond the danger level. If Hitler continues to act like this, we will have no choice but to take action. We already have over 3 million loyal stormtroopers. If you give each of them a gun, they can easily take out a handful of military and police officers. During the beer hall riot, the assault force, which numbered only a few hundred people, was unilaterally swept away as soon as the military crackdown began. But not anymore. The assault corps, which has been steadily increasing in size, has suddenly transformed into Germany's largest armed force, boasting over 3 million members. To put it bluntly, the level of training and armament is nothing worth paying attention to, but the number of 3 million could never be ignored, so the military has not been able to treat the shock troops carelessly. Your Excellency, then what do you plan to do now? Rome had long been accustomed to being called excellent by his subordinates. Whatever. There was no choice but to negotiate with Hitler. Still, it looks like there's still some room left for negotiation. Although he was corrupted, Hitler was a friend who at least thought, unlike the junkers whose brains were so hard-headed that they couldn't work. What will you do if he doesn't listen to you until the end? At that time, I plan to mobilize the shock corps to put pressure on Hitler. I don't want that to happen either. Still, isn't he a colleague who once shared the same cause and even went to jail? Let's hope Hitler makes a wise decision. There was one thing Rome was mistaken about. No matter what he said, those around him had no intention of listening to him. Chapter 13 Night 2. A final meeting was held ahead of Rome's execution. In addition to drawing up a list of key members of the stormtroopers who would be executed along with Rome, discussions were held on those who were not part of the stormtroopers but should also be eliminated on this occasion. The first Pata is Kurt von Schleicher. According to history, he would have been the Chancellor of Germany before Hitler, but due to changes in history, he did not become Chancellor. It won't last forever. Schleicher must have been convinced that he would become Chancellor instead of me, so when he heard that Hindenburg had appointed me as Chancellor, he became angry and started talking about me and Hindenburg behind my back. Even now. There was even evidence of him contacting the French ambassador and receiving bribes from him. Everyone was outraged by Heydrich's words, but I just listened in silence. Originally, Heydrich was good at gathering information, but he also had a natural talent for creating sins that did not exist and blaming them on others. There was no way to immediately check whether that statement was true or whether it was a fabricated false accusation. But the important thing is that it is a clear fact that Schleicher hates me extremely and goes around framing me. If I leave it like this, it might catch me later. In that case, you have no choice but to hit the player early. Still, he was a general of a country, so shouldn't we send him off in a respectable manner? Which method would you like, Your Excellency? Bombs and guns are too loud, so use the quietest method. Yeah, poison would be nice. Someone who is very effective. I will do that. Heydrich wrote down what I said in the notebook he usually carried. After Schleicher was Papen. Franz von Papen. In history, he succeeded Heinrich Brüning as Chancellor, but was fired due to incompetence. It was Schleicher who took over the position of Prime Minister immediately after Papen was fired. Papen, who had a grudge against Schleicher, collaborated with Hitler and helped him come to power, but Hitler openly rejected Papen, who tried to manipulate him into becoming a secret power. When Papen attacked Hitler by giving an anti-Nazi and anti-Hitler speech at the University of Marburg, Hitler warned Papen by executing his associates during the Night of the Long Knives. If you don't want to grow up, let it grow on its own. Papen immediately surrendered to Hitler and served in various positions, including as ambassador to Austria and Turkey, until his death in 1969. Papen is dismissed. No, why? Himmler asked. Of course, I thought they would kill Papen in pairs, but when they opposed it, it was an unexpected reaction. Now Papen is cooperating with us. I don't know what you're thinking inside. There may be something else going on, but you wouldn't know that unless you look directly into a person's brain. Moreover, the president's confidence in him is strong, but if he harms him carelessly, there may be a backlash. But, sir, there is evidence that he said privately that he should have been the next prime minister. Heydrich, like Himmler, protested, perhaps wishing for Papen's death. But it didn't change my mind. Of course you can do that. Unless you're trying to outright fuck me like Schleicher, I'm going to be lenient. You have to shed blood when you have to, but you shouldn't kill people randomly. What you said is correct, Your Excellency. Göring also agreed with me. In actual history, Göring, who had a good relationship with Papen, opposed Papen's execution and protected him. Well, if Your Excellency says so. Goebbels also agreed. You are correct. Slaughter must be done in moderation. Has also voted in favor, and Papen's execution was overruled. The person who was mentioned after Papen was Gregor Strasser. Although not as strong as Ron, Strasser, who had strong socialist tendencies, clashed with Hitler, saying that the Nazi Party's line was too right-wing. Relations were then restored following Strasser's car accident, but his support of Schleicher's coalition proposal incurred Hitler's wrath and forced him to resign from all public positions. Even after Hitler became Chancellor, he did not return to the Nazi Party and worked as a director of a pharmaceutical company, but was purged during the Night of the Long Sword. However, in this world, Schleicher did not become Chancellor and did not propose a coalition government to Strasser, so he was still serving as the Nazi Party's organizational director. This person is still out of his wits and is demanding a change in policy, claiming that the party has degenerated. It is said that, like Schleicher, he does not hesitate to make critical remarks about the Prime Minister in private. Okay? Then is there any evidence? Yes. If you look here, I pretended to look closely at the evidence Heydrich presented, and then quietly put it aside. I think the evidence is very weak. Yes. I didn't tell you, but he sent me a letter through Hess 2 weeks ago. He sincerely apologized for his past mistakes. And he insisted that he would follow my decision unconditionally. This is definitely a lie. If you fall for his lies, I raised my hand and cut off Heydrich. Heaven knows if it's a lie or sincerity. Anyway, I trust him. Of course, I haven't forgotten that he clashed with me in the past over party lines. Still, that kind of thing happens to everyone. Have you had at least one fight with your friends in the past? Yes, that's true, but the situation is too serious to compare it to just playing house. It's a different weight. You might think so. But I trust him. Moreover, Strasser is a comrade who has shared my views for a long time. His brother Otto was shot dead while marching with me in Munich. Yet, rather than blaming me, he remained unwaveringly loyal. If he had been planning on betraying me in the first place, he would have stuck a knife in my back a long time ago. So, you should give me at least one more chance. Although Strasser clashed with Hitler over party lines, he remained personally loyal to Hitler. Even on the night of the Long Sword, when he saw the SS men who came to arrest him, he said, "There's no way he did that." That's how Strasser's life was saved. In the original history, his older brother died and his younger brother lived, but here it is the exact opposite. In addition, Karl, the governor of Bavaria, and several former politicians were mentioned, but most were overlooked. Now that the murder record was complete, all that remained was execution. January 28, 1933. I called Room. Room? Fly. Can I talk to you? Adolf? What's going on? It's no big deal. I'm calling because of a regular meeting. Where are you now? I'm relaxing at the Bad Wies Hot Springs. Right. Convene all executives there by the 30th. I'll be going there soon too. Until then, enjoy your vacation comfortably. Okay. You too, come here and get some rest. Are you saying that your body's fatigue is completely relieved? Okay. Anyway. You also have to know how to rest appropriately. Not only the hot springs but also the restaurants nearby are very tasty. There is a place that specializes in schnacks, so you should definitely try it sometime. All I can say is admiration. Think about it. The phone was disconnected. Shit. A sigh escaped me without even realizing it. What did he say? Himmler approached and asked. I sighed briefly. You just took my word for it. There was no suspicion whatsoever. As expected, he's a short-thinking guy. Well, because we were that close. Lol, it will probably be much later before I use that hot spring. January 30th. The fateful day dawned. Through a spy sent to Bad Wies in advance, it was confirmed that Rome and the officers of the shock corps had gathered at Bad Wies. Everyone arrived without fail. Right. Then let's go too. It was truly a Luger that I had not touched in a long time. After stuffing the Ruger into the holster on his waist, he left the office. Salute to the Prime Minister. Himmler and Heydrich, dressed in black SS uniforms, were waiting for me. All necessary weapons and vehicles were provided by the military. The SS men were waiting for me, fully armed, as if they were going to war. Even the drivers. The needlessly clear sky felt even more awkward compared to Himmler and Heydrich wearing helmets. It's not like we're going to the front line, so what does that look like? I don't think there's any need to wear a helmet. You always have to be prepared for emergencies, Your Excellency. Himmler suggested that I wear a helmet, but I refused. I used it a lot during my active years anyway, man. Let's go. According to history, Hitler should have become Chancellor today, but he became Chancellor last year. In the history of this world, today will be recorded not as Hitler's inauguration as Chancellor, but as the day of the purge. Joseph Dietrich, a Prussian state legislator and SS lieutenant general, had already arrived in Munich with 2 SS companies and was waiting for us. After joining Dietrich, we immediately headed to Rome. Upon arriving at the lodgings where Rome was staying, 2 commanders came out to meet him. Welcome, Mr. Prime Minister. Now the Chief of Staff arrest me. As I raised my hand, the sturdy SS men leapt out like a spring and captured the 2 commanders. What? Why are you doing this all of a sudden? After we dispose of Rom, we will decide how to dispose of him. Take me away. I went up the stairs with the SS men in tow. As they reached Rome's room, Dietrich kicked in the door. From what I understand, when he was arrested, Rome was lying naked in bed with his 2 lovers, but fortunately he was alone here. Rome, who was dressed in pajamas, stared at me with a blank face, as if he was so shocked that no words came out. Rom, I am arresting you. Chapter 14 Night 3. Hey, Adolf. I think the joke went too far. Rom shouted in astonishment. Dietrich, who was next to me, snorted in response to Rome's words. Does this look like a joke to you now? Dietrich aimed his underwater Luger at Rome's head. He meant that if he had to, he would kill him immediately. Anyway, you're so shameless that you might be called a faggot. You're such a disgusting pig. Himmler also helped. Hey, look. Can you explain why this is happening? Take it away. I turned away, ignoring Rom's desperate plea. The SS men rushed in and captured Rome, and Rome resisted fiercely and cried out, but this only made the SS members angry. Stay still, you bastard. You pig. As the butt cut through the air, a sound like a pork cutlet hammer hitting meat rang out. 5 minutes later, Rome was dragged out by SS men, his face full of bruises. My nose was bleeding from a broken nose, and my eyes were so swollen that I couldn't open them properly. This bastard. These were the words he uttered in a strained voice as he passed by me. The SS man who heard this swung the butt and struck him in the back. This Chewie is really. You need to be beaten more to come to your senses. For a moment? Still, he was our comrade. So just let it go. Yes. Ah, I understand. Rome was thrown into the back of the truck like a piece of luggage. All SS staff members who were staying in Badwees with Rome were also captured by SS members and dragged out. While some, like Rome, were in pajamas, many were naked. He deserved to know what he had been caught doing. Like Rome, they seemed not to understand why they had been arrested. A few people pointed at me and swore at me. Every time that happened, the surrounding SS members rushed in and beat him to death. All the traitors have been arrested. I say so, Your Excellency. I nodded quietly to Dietrich's words. How about we search this area in case there are people who noticed and ran away? Heydrich's words. He must have known that no one escaped. Still, the reason he says this is probably to emphasize his thoroughness and attract my attention. There is no need to do that. If they were quick-witted, they wouldn't have come here. Lastly, I looked around the Badwees area. Surprised by the commotion in the middle of the night, several residents went outside to check what was happening, but were stopped by SS members and went back in. But the light in the room did not turn off. I think we made too much of a fuss. Let's just withdraw. All right. I went to the Nazi headquarters in Munich and called an emergency meeting. The party executives who had been notified in advance were already waiting at the party headquarters, and the rest rushed over after receiving the summons order. When all the executives gathered, I made an important announcement in front of them. I'm sorry for suddenly calling you without warning. The reason I called you was none other than because Rome was planning a coup. When word came out that Rome was planning to stage a coup, the whole became agitated. Don't worry. Because Rome and his gang have already been arrested. I explained step by step the outline, process, and conclusion of the incident to the executives. Even executives who at first had no idea what was going on quickly noticed and expressed their support with enthusiastic applause and shouts. As expected of you. Sieg Heil. Heil Hitler. I left the company building, leaving behind thunderous applause. They will explain to the residents what happened. Now I have to go finish it. Around the time Rome was arrested in Munich, the SS, military, and police began to take action in major German cities, including Berlin. Get everyone out. You damn commies. Rome's associates, as well as those involved and those on the SS's death list, were all arrested or killed. Among the upper echelons of SA, everyone except some who were close to Victor Luce were purged, and even their families were caught up in the uproar and killed. When the bloody winds of the purge blew, Schleicher was at his home. Hitler, he finally showed his true colors. Schleicher clicked his tongue and shuddered at the fact that a half-baked politician who had been a petty sergeant was in reality a monster with a sword hidden inside. After hearing the news from his housekeeper, he quickly tried to find out the situation through his close associates. After confirming that Hitler was mobilizing the SS to purge Rome and the SA, Schleicher pondered what to do next. If Hitler had any sense, he would quickly realize that I didn't like him. Maybe you already know. Schleicher, who was thinking ominously, broke into a cold sweat. Maybe he's already preparing to harm me. The only thing Schleicher could rely on was the Hindenburg. Although their relationship became somewhat estranged due to the issue of appointment to the position of prime minister, they maintained a close relationship to the extent of occasionally exchanging news. After all, that's the only way to live. Schleicher decided to send an aide to make an appointment with Hindenburg. Unlike Rome, Hitler clearly knows that I and the president have a close relationship, as no harm has yet been done to him. If you meet the president and confirm your friendship before he changes his mind, even Hitler will not be able to touch you. It's mealtime. Master. Just then the housekeeper brought out breakfast. It was a simple yet hearty menu consisting of freshly baked bread, boiled eggs, cheese, bacon, and coffee. As was his habit, Schleicher drank coffee first. But today the coffee tasted a little strange. Why do you think I wrote more than usual? Is the coffee bad? But why am I so sleepy? Something is wrong. Thud. Lord, Master. The housekeeper saw Schleicher lying on the floor while drinking coffee and hurried over, but Schleicher was already unconscious. The next morning, the newspaper briefly reported the death of Kurt von Schleicher, Deputy Minister of Defense and Lieutenant General of the Army Reserve. With the news that incumbent Chancellor Adolf Hitler expressed condolences. The SA executives arrested along with Rome were imprisoned in a dungeon at Munich's Stadeleim prison. And on that day, all arrested executives were executed by firing squad. The only person still alive was Rome. When Rome finally came to his senses, he realized that two men were standing in front of him. At first, he raised his head with a small hope that Hitler had came to see him, but it was a face he had never seen before. You came to your senses. SS Lieutenant Colonel Theodoric looked down at Rome, who was covered in blood, with a grave expression. "Hey, let me meet Hitler. Your Excellency the Prime Minister. He has already left Munich." As it gestured, SS Major Michael Lippert, who was next to him, handed him a copy of today's newspaper and a Luger .08. And not a single bullet. "Originally, you would have been executed by firing squad, but Your Excellency has given you one last chance. Use your own judgment. I'll be back in 10 minutes. After Rick and Lippert left, Rome picked up the newspaper with trembling hands. Newspapers printed the news that he had attempted to stage a coup by inciting a shock trooper. Nonsense. Why is this? Newspapers also reported that Rome was a lecher and libertine who was fanatical about having sexual intercourse with young boys, and that he even accepted bribes from France to overthrow the current regime. The ugly bare face of the leader of the assault troop. Can't sleep without a man? A coup that ended in an attempted coup. All involved arrested. French ambassador issues emergency statement. France has nothing to do with this incident. He. After understanding the situation, Rome put down the newspaper. And he sat blankly and looked at the ceiling. When I first met Hitler, I thought that this man would definitely start a revolution with him and change the country from head to toe. When he came to power, Rome was happier than anyone else. I firmly believed that the day of true revolution was just around the corner. The old army, which was nothing more than a guard of corrupt and incompetent junkers and greedy capitalists, disappeared, and the hope of creating a true people's army with one's own hands arose. But Hitler thought differently. Hitler had no intention of creating a people's army or participating in the revolution. To him, he was just an outcast who could be exploited. Why did I only realize that fact now? After the promised 10 minutes, Eck and Rupert reappeared in the cell. Rome was still alive. His bullets also remained unloaded in his pistol. I kicked away my last chance. I clicked his tongue and shook his head. Rome, who made eye contact with Ike, spoke in a desperate voice. "I still have something to say. So, shoot." Before Rome could finish speaking, Rupert pulled out his Luger and aimed at Rome's heart. Sparks flew from the muzzle of the gun. Rome, who was hit by a bullet, reflexively flinched. 2 shots were fired at him. The second bullet also penetrated his chest. Blood flowed backwards and consciousness became clouded. "Mr. Prime Minister." These were the words that Rome, who was lying on the floor and coughing up blood, uttered with the last of his strength. "You should have said that sooner." Those were the last words Rome heard before he completely lost his breath. Gunshots rang out once again. Chapter 15 Final Solution to the Problem. 1. Immediately after the Night of the Long Sword ended, there was an uproar throughout Europe, including Germany, over this incident. Britain and France fiercely criticized me, calling it a riot that could not occur in a country governed by law, but the domestic response was quite different. Of course, there was shock and condemnation for the unauthorized killing of the officers of the shock brigades without legal procedures, but the public's reaction was generally well done. It may seem like a lie, but it's true. It was like that in real history too. Why did the people support and cheer instead of condemn such a barbaric incident? It's simple. To ordinary citizens, what the stormtroopers were doing looked the same. Not only the military, but even citizens did not look upon the shock troops with kind eyes. It was common for people to be beaten up on the streets if they did not like them, and even the leader was an openly gay man. Even in the 21st century, where PCs are overflowing, society's view of homosexuals is not very kind, but will it be worse in the 20th century? Considering that the hatred toward homosexuals during this time was much stronger than the hatred toward people of color, it was natural that the entire nation hated the assault brigades. Since the leadership of the shock troopers, a gathering place for gays and gangsters, were executed for dreaming of treason, although in fact it was fabricated, the people enthusiastically supported the government, saying that it had done a good job. Finally, when even Hindenburg praised me in his own speech, saying that it was a great and bold choice, any remaining voices of criticism were drowned out. However, this was limited to domestic affairs, and foreign reactions were still cold. Not only Britain, which claimed to be the guardian of European democracy and peace, but also France, which was suddenly accused of being behind the coup, poured out criticism and condemnation against me every day. Italy also joined the mainstream and fiercely criticized it, saying it was something only barbarians would do. Rather, the Soviet Union only issued a formal statement of criticism and did not show any significant response. The reason is simple: Stalin had a favorable opinion of Hitler. In real history, when Stalin heard about the Night of the Long Knives, he said to his close associate Anastas Mikoyan, "What a great friend." He is said to have praised Hitler by saying, "You did a great job." Even though their ideologies were different, there seemed to be something in common between the same dictators. As time passed, criticism gradually faded, but the world's view of Germany was still not positive. However, by chance, an incident occurred that completely blew away this perception. What is by far the worst crime committed by Nazi Germany? Undermining democracy and dictatorship? War of aggression? No matter what, the number one thing is definitely the Holocaust. Throughout human history, countries with severe discrimination against other ethnic groups are as common as stones on the streets. In fact, it is difficult to find a country where there is no discrimination against other ethnic groups. You may have thought the following at least once: there are countless countries that have committed racism and genocide, so why is Nazi Germany the only one represented as synonymous with such acts? If you count the number of people massacred, China is first, and the Soviet Union is second. Right now, not only Britain, France, and the United States, but even the small country of Belgium slaughtered over 3 million Congolese in the Congo. But even compared to those countries, Nazi Germany was different. This is a country that went beyond trying to annihilate other races, and the massacre itself was a state-led project. The Nazis mobilized all the scientific technology and administrative systems of the time to carry out more efficient massacres, and created human slaughter factories called extermination camps such as Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor. Even in a wartime situation where supplies were scarce, they could not give up the massacre. Think about it with common sense. There is a fuss at the front lines about lack of supplies and manpower, but the leadership runs a massacre factory at the rear, even though they clearly know this. Is this a thought that could come out of a normal person's head? Of course, if the manpower needed for the massacre, the administration to send the Jews to the concentration camp, the materials to build barracks to accommodate the Jews, and the food to feed the immediately detained Jews had been sent to the front lines, the material shortage would have been greatly alleviated. The leadership would not have been unaware of that simple fact. But the Nazis didn't do that. The only country that was so serious about massacres was Nazi Germany. In particular, his hatred for Jews was so pathological that he would unconditionally kill them just because they were Jews, even if they were loyal and useful to Germany and had made meritorious contributions in the past. What is even more shocking is that even the general public actively supported the government's oppression of Jews. Although they were shocked when the massacre was revealed after the war, it also means that they took for granted the oppression that was not massacre. Although I am now wearing Hitler's body and following the same path that Hitler took, I have no intention of repeating the massacres he committed. I remember this being said before. Even now, that resolve remains unchanged. But unfortunately, our German friends don't seem to think so. What did you say just now, Himmler? That's literally it, Your Excellency. Himmler confidently suggested to me that full-scale suppression of the Jews should be carried out. He came to my office in the morning and asked me what he was talking about, and he started talking nonsense again. Sir, Jews are like a cancer in German society. They are ruining our economy, draining our wealth abroad, and even corrupting our racial excellence. If these disgusting seeds are left alone, the purity of the German people will become difficult to find in history. So from now on, Himmler, I don't have time, so I will speak as briefly as possible. Listen to me carefully. I felt my anger slowly rising and I fired quickly. Why are you risking your life for something so useless and trivial? There are a mountain of problems that are more important than the Jewish problem you are talking about and that need to be resolved faster. And didn't I say this before? I don't care one bit about Jews. So, Your Excellency, you need to pay attention from now on. When I spoke in a strong tone, Himmler recoiled as if embarrassed, but nevertheless did not try to back down easily. Many of the communists who are a cancer in Germany, as you mentioned, are Jews. The person who pledged to completely eradicate communism from Germany, why does he leave alone the Jews who are producing communists? I don't understand. If I had the same heart, I wanted to put a bullet between the eyes, but I barely held back because I didn't know what kind of chaos it would cause if I did that. What can I say to make that guy shut up? Let's think about it, think. As I closed my eyes and was lost in thought, a brilliant idea occurred to me. Himmler, if you come out like that, how about this? Himmler. Yes. Do you know why I chose you? Yes. Himmler was taken aback by the unexpected question. Of course, because His Excellency recognized my loyalty while I was imprisoned in Landsberg prison. Himmler proved his loyalty to me by sending me letters every day. Even in real history, Hitler remembered Himmler's letter and hired him after his release. There is that, but only because I think you are intelligent and capable. It's hard to find a friend like you who is as clear-headed and quick-thinking as you are. Yeah, it's a lie. However, Himmler seemed to have taken my words to heart and smiled brightly. Thank you, Your Excellency. As expected of you, Excellency, for thinking of me that way, but I think that may change now. Yes. I thought you were smart and capable, but I can't believe you were fooled by such ridiculous rumors. I'm so disappointed, Himmler. I'm really disappointed. I sighed loudly on purpose. As expected, Himmler was embarrassed and was left with his mouth open, not knowing what to do. I don't know what you're talking about. I knew you didn't like Jews very much. But I didn't know that you would seriously believe in such nonsense. Seeing Himmler flustered made me excited. I suppressed the smile that spread across my face and continued speaking in as restrained a voice as possible. Jews are communists. This is all nonsense. That's a typical lie made up by disgusting scum who want to hinder Germany's development. Do you know why? I don't know. It may be true that there are Jews among communists. But among them there are many who are not Jews, but what you call pure-blood Aryans. If all communists are Jews, doesn't that mean that Aryans are ultimately Jews too? No. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, shut up and listen, man. I'm not finished talking yet. Do you know what I have been insisting on since 1919? It's unity, unity. I always said this to the people. We need to come together as one. But, instead of uniting, if we are divided into groups such as Jews and non-Jews and fight against each other, do you think there will be unity? You're welcome. They will bite, tear and fight each other and eventually destroy themselves. The whole saying that Jews are communists is nonsense. It's a rumor made up by those who block the development of the great German nation and wish for Germany's destruction. But you, no one else, and the head of the SS, believe such nonsense. Are you trying to play a joke with me? On this day, for the first time in his life, Himmler was treated like a dog by me. Himmler left the office with a miserable look on his face, like an ant hearing the news that the stocks he had invested all his money in had plummeted. Himmler's body trembled like an aspen as he walked out the office door. Phew, I'm finally feeling a bit relieved. From that day on, Himmler could not bring out the Jewish sword in front of me. However, anti-Semitism was still prevalent in the civilian world. Not only Himmler, but also Goebbels and Heydrich sometimes annoyed me by insinuating that I needed to do something to the Jews. They seem like disgusting guys. No, Dr. Goebbels. I didn't know you hated the Jews so much. Why do you hate Jews so much? Of course, Jews are a burden to German society. Wait. Didn't you say before that many of the professors who taught you in the past were Jewish? Yes. No, how do you do that? I mean, that. I changed my target to Heydrich before Goebbels had time to reply. Heydrich, as far as I know, I heard that your father was friendly with Jewish acquaintances in the past. How do you know that, Your Excellency? How do you know? Look at this guy. Didn't you say it yourself at the last party? Me? I don't remember that, do you? Then what did I hear? Well, that is. I didn't have time or thought to listen to the tirade about how important it was to solve the Jewish problem, so I used my knowledge of the future to counterattack the two. Every time that happened, both of us felt very embarrassed, like students who were caught cheating during an exam by their teacher. It's just embarrassing. They obviously never said that, but I knew every single detail. By now, you're both probably wondering if you've become forgetful. Goering and Hess did not open their mouths when they heard that Himmler had been ripped off by me, but they also did not express any particular objection to anti-Semitism. That is why anti-Semitism was natural in Germany. I also did not want to touch the Jewish issue any more than necessary. It is true that anti-Semitism is a problem, but there was concern that attempts to actively eliminate it might backlash. My goal is to transition smoothly while maintaining the current situation. I won't touch you, so don't touch me either. Let's just keep the line, okay? However, a letter addressed to me changed my mind. A letter? Yes, that's right. This is a letter addressed to Your Excellency. While I was working in my office as usual, I received a letter. Letters came often as usual. 95% were fan letters from my supporters and 5% were anonymous comments criticizing me. There were so many letters that I instructed Morris to properly censor all the letters that came to me. Except for the really important ones. The letters Morris brought were mostly from high-ranking Nazi Party officials and politicians. However, this letter was different. Of all the letters I have ever received, the most memorable name was written there. Einstein? Albert Einstein. That's right, he is the scientist of the scientists who created the theory of relativity. Einstein sent me a letter directly. I couldn't control my excitement. Since it was a letter from Einstein, I had to read it no matter what. The question of why he sent me the letter was quickly resolved. The only reason Einstein sent me a letter was because he wanted me to solve the anti-Semitism that was rampant in Germany. Chapter 16 Final Solution to the Problem. 2. Dear Prime Minister, my name is Albert Einstein. You may feel a little arrogant, but I don't think there's any need to introduce myself. This is not an arrogant attitude, but rather an attempt to tell the truth, so please understand with an open mind. I don't know if you know, Your Excellency, but I have Jewish blood flowing in my veins. Of course, I consider myself German, and my identity as a German is stronger than my identity as a Jew. But it seems otherwise to the people around you. It may be a bit unexpected, But I would like to tell you about something that happened in my past. When I was a young student going to elementary school, I once found a nail covered in rust on the playground. I picked this up and took it to my homeroom teacher. I picked up the nails out of concern that someone might step on the old nails and get hurt, but on the other hand, it was also out of the hope that if I did the right thing, my homeroom teacher would praise me, and then there would be less teasing about being Jewish than before. I did. However, my homeroom teacher publicly humiliated me by showing the nails I had picked up to the class and saying, "The Jews crucified Jesus with these nails." As a child, I was very heartbroken at that time. If I could, I wanted to scream and jump out the window or hide in a rat hole. Even as an adult, that incident remains an unforgettable, bitter wound to me. This is the reality that Jews, including me, face. Even though we were not born into Jewish blood because we wanted to, we live our lives being discriminated against simply because we were born Jewish. Even though we all live with pride in being German citizens and loyalty to the German flag. As I became famous and gained my own wealth and status, discrimination and teasing about being Jewish disappeared from my immediate life, but social discrimination and persecution are still inflicted on those who are not. Even politicians who should be interested in these issues have been indifferent to Jewish issues for a long time. On this point, both the Kaiser and the Social Democratic Party were consistent. Maybe we should just be thankful that they didn't actively call out anti-Semitism. But what is wrong with children who will be born as Jews in the future, so that they have to repeat the discrimination we have experienced and are still experiencing? I sincerely hope that Your Excellency will open the way for a solution to this problem. There's a lot more I want to say, but I don't think it would be polite to Your Excellency, who is probably several times busier than me, so I'll stop here. May God be with you. Posted by Albert Einstein. Huh. This is it. I never thought the day would come when Einstein would write to me about this issue. Even though World War II hasn't even started yet, it feels like history has changed 180 degrees. Let's think about it. How will you act from now on? If you put the letter in the incinerator and act as if nothing happened, your body will feel at ease, even though your mind may be uncomfortable. There is no need for me to go out and pick a beehive. What if I push myself too hard and end up getting stabbed in the back? There is also a way to maintain authority by closing one's eyes and giving only moderate criticism, as has been done so far. However, in that case, the Jewish problem will never be solved. Discrimination and persecution of Jews will continue and Germans will never change. Furthermore, the whole world. It was something that was bound to happen anyway. Above all, it is a problem that no one else can solve except me. If so, shouldn't we solve it right now? June 6, 1933. I gave a speech to the nation at the Imperial House. Before the speech, I told the media to pay attention because I had an important announcement to make. At this moment, the media not only in Germany but also around the world are probably looking forward to hearing what will come out of my mouth. Respected German citizens, I stand here today because I have something I want to say to you. I deliberately filled the front row with people from all over Germany. They had made arrangements in advance to answer any questions I asked. But I didn't know what I was going to say. I did not even tell my close associates, including Göring, Goebbels, Himmler,